רחם בו השם אלוהינו רחם על ישראל עמך רחם ועל ירושלים עירך רחם רחם
רחם השם אלוקינו רחם על ישראל עמך רחם ועל ירושלים עירך רחם רחם רחם
הציון משכן כבוידך
משכן כבוידך
והמלכות בסדומים משיחך
ועל הבית הגדול והקדוש רחם 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 ציון משכן כבוידך ועל מלכות בית דוד משיחך ועל הבית הגדול והקדוש רחם רחם רחם
על ישראל עמך רחם ועל ירושלים עירך רחם רחם
רחם רחם השם אלוקינו רחם על ישראל עמך רחם ועל ירושלים עירך רחם רחם רחם
הציון משכן כבוידך
הציון משכן כבוידך ועל הבית הגדול והקדוש רחם 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 ועל ציון משכן כבוידך ועל מלכות בית דוד משיחך ועל הבית הגדול והקדוש ירחם ירחם ירחם
Alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos me se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יקק, ישמורך ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Hakham Melech Rahmiel of Karaite Insights and the World Alliance of Qara'im. Let's hide this. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And that's what I usually put up. Okay. So welcome to this week's study. Today we're going to be continuing our study in Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23 is the list of biblical holidays, the explanation of biblical holidays. And as we know that as Karaites, whether we are traditional Karaites, quote unquote Egyptian Karaites, or neo-Karaites, I should explain those phrases because it's come up a lot among various discussions that I've had lately. So the traditional Karaites, what we also call the Egyptian Karaites, they are mostly, if you go back before 1950-ish, I can't remember the exact year, most Karaites, or the center of Karaism in the world, was in Cairo, Egypt. After the 1948 war, all of the Jews basically got thrown out of Egypt, and many went to Israel. This included the Egyptian Karaites, or the Karaites whose center were in Egypt. They came to Israel. They eventually established their center in Ramla, kind of near Tel Aviv, and they keep a very traditional form of Karaism. Most of the quote-unquote Egyptian Karaites, as we call them, or these more traditional Karaites, I don't like that phrase, the Egyptian Karaites, they keep a kind of medieval or late medieval, that's a bit simplistic, but we'll call it a late medieval form of Karaism. And many of their ways of doing things, many of the prayers they say, were heavily influenced by rabbinical Judaism. And not only that, they traditionally have been an extremely insular group, not letting new people, even Jews, join their community. And most of them were born into Karaism rather than choosing Karaism by themselves. So that's in contrast to the overall umbrella group that I would say that we belong to at the World Alliance of Qara'im, which is called the Neo-Karaites, or it has been phrased the Neo-Karaites. The Neo-Karaites consist mostly of people such as myself, who were originally involved in, or who were originally part of Standard Orthodox Judaism, myself, my own background is that I grew up in the suburbs of New York City into a conservative Jewish family. We went to a conservative Jewish synagogue growing up, or shall I say, I was dragged against my will to a conservative Jewish synagogue growing up when I couldn't weasel my way out of it. And it really didn't do much for me at all. I didn't enjoy it very much. It didn't leave much of a lasting impression on me. And I didn't think much of anything about it. And then later in life, in circumstances that I won't get into right now, it's kind of a long story, I found my way back to Judaism and eventually got involved in Orthodox Judaism. And then very soon after, I decided to go to Israel, and I ended up staying in Israel and learning in Orthodox Jewish yeshivas for a total of about 10 years, various different ones, and living more or less as an Orthodox Jew. From day one, maybe it's because I didn't know anything about Orthodox Judaism, very little about Orthodox Judaism when I got into it at around the age of 25. Or maybe it's just my nature. I've always been a truth seeker, and I've always been someone who's kind of, what's the expression, marched to the beat of my own drum and not put up with anyone's or any movement's BS. I think because of that, I always felt from day one that something was a little bit wrong once I got into Orthodox Judaism. It always stuck in the back of my mind, but I became very quickly brainwashed into that mode of thinking, so much so that, I started, I lived as an Orthodox Jew for, like I said, about a period of 10 years, from about 1990, maybe a little bit less than 10 years. So really 1993, about 2001, when I finally officially declared myself as a Karaite. But I do remember a certain incident when I was learning at a certain yeshiva in the old city of Jerusalem named Aish Torah, which me and my friends have lovingly renamed Aish HaToilet. All my friends know that joke already, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit of a chuckle out of it. So when I was learning at Aish HaToilet, I remember after a couple months there, something didn't seem right. And I found another yeshiva, it doesn't matter what it was, at the same time, that was much more into teaching Hebrew, learning Hebrew, getting involved in Israeli culture, encouraging people to go into the army, the Israeli army, the IDF, etc. And I realized that actually God, that Yahweh had kind of led my path to this other yeshiva. And I decided once I realized that I needed to switch to this other place, then I went to it wasn't the head of the yeshiva at Aish Torah. He was, I guess he was the dean of students or something like that. So I remember his name, Rabbi Blackman. And I said to him, listen, Rabbi Blackman, I have only been studying Torah really for a couple months. So I have no idea what Torah is, but I know that what you're teaching me, what they're teaching me here, what you guys are teaching me here at Aish Torah is not Torah. So goodbye, see you later. And I grabbed my stuff and left, literally, basically just like that. And I found it very ironic because they went out of their way. Let me just turn on the light here. They went out of their way to try to make me stay for various reasons. I was useful to them, or they thought they could mold me into the kind of person that they like to mold people into. And so they basically all but, I won't go so far as to say begged me, but they almost begged me to stay, basically. Why you're going, you're going to do great here, we really like you here, etc. The irony is that many of my friends who had made in those couple of months, who did not fit their mold, had been, and I spoke to somebody today about this at a lunch, who was also said her father was one of these people. I didn't know her father specifically, but I noticed that a lot of people who did not fit their mold, or who they felt were not up to their standards, they had very kind of elitist kind of standards, they basically just tossed out unexpectedly. They would tell certain people, "I'll get your stuff and get out. You're not welcome here anymore." And these were the same people that they encouraged to stay in Israel and in Jerusalem and learn at the yeshiva in the first place. Anyway, I'm getting a bit off track. Neither here nor there. I realized at a very early stage that something did not seem right. In the mid-90s, I was encouraged by a good friend of mine to start reading Tanakh without any commentary, without the rabbinical commentaries, without any forethought as to what the Tanakh was trying to say or not trying to say. And I started doing that. And I realized that this was what I had been looking for all along, that what the Tanakh was saying was a straightforward message to the people of Israel, to the world. It made sense to me. Rabbinical Judaism didn't make any sense to me. And that began my journey towards Karaism. And again, a bit of a long story. I published a newspaper for a number of years then named Your Jerusalem. It's still online. You can visit it at yourjerusalem.org. It's in the word, Y-O-U-R, Jerusalem.org. And eventually in 2001, officially declared myself as a Karaite. So I fit into what, getting back to the original discussion, I fit into what would be generally called the Neo-Karaites. I came to Karaism on my own after having explored more traditional forms of Judaism. So I fit into what's called the Neo-Karaites. Okay, so as a Neo-Karaite, I tend to think that our attempt is to find a more pure form of Torah, that the Egyptian Karaites, or the quote-unquote Egyptian / more traditional Karaites, have been heavily co-opted by the rabbis over the years. There were many Jews living in Egypt, in Cairo, and so there's a lot of interaction between the rabbinical Jews there and the Karaite Jews there. And over the years, and in other places as well, other centers such as Istanbul, previous to that, Crimea, Troki, Lithuania, there was a fair amount of interaction between the Karaites and the rabbinical Jews. And the Karaites, as a group, slowly, it seems, gave into the majority society and became more and more rabbinized. And there are many examples of that. Many of the ways they interpret Torah, many of the prayers they say, for instance, they'll say blessings, just like the rabbis do before they eat a piece of food. They'll say a blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adama, right? So that comes straight out of rabbinical Judaism. I'm very against, as I've said many times, I'm very against set prayers, set blessings. I think that one should pray from the heart and should not read scripted little, pieces of of someone else's writing at specific times. This is not what I see in the Torah. Although there are some instances, and I've actually made a list of them, of when we're supposed to say specific things at specific times. I just ran into one the other day. I can't remember what it was. What was it again? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But there are certain times, for instance, the prayer that the Kohanim say when they bless Israel is a very specific prayer. It's very specific words. Okay, this is explicitly in the Torah, but for the most part, prayer is supposed to be free and from the heart. If we see the prayers of David in the Psalms, if we see the prayer of Hannah, we see the prayer of Deborah, we see these are all free-form prayers from the heart. So to adopt this rabbinical idea that we're constantly have to say these little scripted pieces of someone else's writing in order to communicate with Yahweh, in order to communicate with our God, goes very much against what I believe is a good and healthy way, a correct way to interact with our Creator, to interact with Yahweh. At any rate, so that is the difference between the So that is the difference between, in general, the traditional / Egyptian Karaites and the Neo-Karaites. So I'm just clearing that up because it has come up in a bunch of conversations here and there, and so I wanted to make that distinction. So the Neo-Karaites would be characterized by those who eventually found their way back to Karaism, who rejected rabbinical Judaism, who saw the lies in rabbinical Judaism. I mean, what is rabbinical Judaism? I was at someone's Shabbat table today here where I live in Katzrin and in the Golan Heights. I encourage one and all to please, if you want to be part of a live Karaite community, come to the land of Israel, move up to the Golan Heights. It is absolutely gorgeous here. It's beautiful here. The people are very welcoming. Most of the community that I belong to, which is rabbinical Jews, because we don't have a Karaite community here at this point, are very open to what I have to say. Some of them, I think, maybe even many of them secretly agree with me, but for various reasons, they can't say it. They're brainwashed so much into rabbinical Judaism that they may, on some kind of visceral level, agree with me, but can't deprogram themselves from the brainwashing of rabbinical Judaism. But at any rate, I was about to say something. Right. So I forgot what I was going to say. It doesn't matter. At any rate, the main point here is if you want to be part of a live World Alliance of Qara'im, Neo-Karaite community where we live on the land, in the land of Israel, on the land, and attempt to establish a society or attempt to establish a community where we are following the ways of the Torah as we believe as much as possible. We can, the way they were followed in ancient times before the rabbis co-opted, usurped power from the nation and completely changed their understandings of the Torah and then called it evolution or called it a development. So I always say the stupid rabbis believe that the quote-unquote oral law of the rabbis came from Sinai, was passed down from Moshe to Joshua, etc., as it says at the beginning of the Mishnah Avot or Pirkei Avot. Those are the stupid rabbinical Jews. The smarter ones will talk about something like an evolution or development. That rabbinical Judaism is a development, rabbinical Judaism evolution. It's an advancement. It was gradual, etc. That's a lot of baloney. We don't find any evidence anywhere in the Tanakh through the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. So we're talking already past the year approximately 500 BCE. We don't find any evidence that that Israel kept the Torah in a way that resembled rabbinical Judaism at all. We know that the rabbis arose approximately in the around the year 200 BCE, give or take, and rose to prominence rather quickly towards the end of the Hashmonean period or towards the middle of the Hashmonean period. And they brought along with them a lot of these innovations in Judaism, innovations in Torah, which fundamentally changed the religion to make it unrecognizable. So Israel kept the same religion for 1,200 years approximately. If we say that Moses lived around 1200 BCE, which is the date that I think is usually accepted, more or less, until about a little bit before that, 1200. We'll say 1,000 years from 1200 BCE to around 200 BCE. Israel kept the Torah in a very straightforward way, as we can see in the Tanakh itself. As we see many examples of the way that they kept the Torah in ancient Israel. We see how Israel lived its life day to day, and we don't see any of the main elements of rabbinical Judaism. And then all of a sudden, or very quickly, at around 200 BCE, here comes this group, heavily influenced by Zoroastrianism in Babylon, heavily influenced by the Greek culture, Hellenist culture, and they come along and they basically they take Torah and they form basically a new religion out of it called Pharisaic or rabbinical Judaism, fundamentally changing the way that we kept as a nation the Torah, or had kept the Torah for 1,000 years. They called this a development. They called this an evolution. They called this an advancement. But really, what it is what it always has been. It's been a usurpation of the simple and straightforward ways that all of Israel understood the Torah for 1,000 years before that. It's been a usurpation of the power structures that were set up by the Torah, meaning the Kohanim, the Levites, the house of David, the prophets, the judges, and the top judge in the Torah is always appointed by a prophet. If you look through the book of Judges, you'll see each of the judges was chosen one by one by a prophet. In other words, chooses the nation of Israel is the prophets, the judges, the hierarchy of judges that are set up. They replaced it. I was just speaking to somebody, a good friend of mine, this week, who I'll have some more to say about him in coming weeks. He's going to be Bizarat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, taking on an important role within the World Alliance of Qara'im. But he was shocked when we were speaking about the Sanhedrin, and he thought, he asked me, am I waiting, am I hoping to reestablish the Sanhedrin? And I said, absolutely not. The Sanhedrin has nothing to do with Torah, with what's laid down in the Torah. There's no such thing in the Torah as a vote or rule by majority, which is exactly what the Sanhedrin was. That's a democratic, or that's a Greek idea. That's democracy, right? That you take a vote, and the winning and those who and the side that prevails is what is chosen. The idea there was no such thing as a panel of judges that decide cases. There was a single judge in the Torah, and the single judge decided the case. Now, the judge is a wise man. He's going to do a lot of prayer. He's going to do a lot of meditation. He's going to look through the text of the Torah. Maybe he's going to consult with those that he trusts before he renders a decision, but he's acting alone. And we see this throughout the Tanakh. I can't think of any example where we see a panel of judges adjudicating the case. We had a hierarchy of judges. We had the judges in the cities, in the local areas, and then you had the main judge. This is Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 9. You had the main judge that sat where eventually on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, or eventually in the place where Yahweh chose to place his name. But there was no such thing as a panel of deciding by vote. That idea is Greek. That idea comes from the ideas of democracy, where you have a vote, where you have a parliament, and then that votes on decisions. And it is completely foreign to Torah. In fact, the word Sanhedrin comes from the word Sinhedrion, which is a Greek word for sitting together. In fact, I think I've said it before, but we could take a little bit of a side tour, and I'll just read very briefly. Let's do it this way. I can read the Wikipedia article on the Sanhedrin, and specifically the history. So the Sanhedrin, actually, let me bring this up on the screen. Just give me a second here. Because I think it's very important for us as to know this. Shoham, stop bothering Levi. Say hello to Hakham Shoham. You're just the smartest cat in the world, right? Stop bothering Hakham Levi. The other smartest cat in the world. I have two very genius cats here. Okay, so let's see. Let me share the screen. Do this. Share screen, window, and there we go. You should be able to see it now. Okay, so let's read through this very briefly and find out what the Sanhedrin really was and really is. Okay, so it comes from the Sanhedrin. Is a loan word from Koine Greek. Koine Greek was kind of common Greek, or Greek that was spoken throughout the Hellenistic world. Okay, so Sanhedrin. Sanhedrion is assembly of sitting together. Hence, assembly or council was and judicial assembly of either 23 or 70 elders existing at both a local and central level in the ancient land of Israel. There were two classes of rabbinical courts called Sanhedrins, greater and lesser. A lesser Sanhedrin of 23 judges was appointed to sit as a tribunal in each city. So what's the idea of a tribunal? A tribunal is a panel of judges. Decisions are made by majority rule. There was only one great Sanhedrin of 70 judges, which among other roles acted as a Supreme Court, taking appeals from cases that lesser courts decided. In general usage, the Sanhedrin without qualifier usually refers to great Sanhedrin. So we see that a lot of rabbinical Jews, the more religious ones, or the more, I'll say, messianic ones, not in the sense of messianic, but messianic in the sense of those who are trying to, bring the end of days or work towards the end of days, want to reestablish the Sanhedrin. There have been a number of attempts in, I guess, recent decades to reestablish the Sanhedrin. And I always get asked as a Karaite, do you want to reestablish the Sanhedrin? And I say, absolutely not. I want absolutely nothing to do with the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is not an idea that comes from Torah. It's an idea that was taken from the Greeks. It's a rule by group, by majority rule by group, by tribunal, rather than individual judges making decisions. Okay. Let's see. We'll go ahead a little bit. In the Second Temple period, the Great Sanhedrin met in the temple in Jerusalem in a building called the Hall of Hewed Stones. The Great Sanhedrin convened every day except festivals and the Sabbath day. After the destruction of the Second Temple and the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt, so the Second Temple, I won't even go there. The Great Sanhedrin was moved to Galilee, not far from where I live right now, which became part of the Roman province of Syria, Palestina. In this period, the Sanhedrin was sometimes called the Galilean Patriarchate or Patriarchate of Palestina, the governing legal body of Galilean Jewry. In the late 200s CE, the name Sanhedrin was dropped and its decisions were issued under the Beit HaMidrash, House of Learning. The last universally binding decision of the Great Sanhedrin appeared in 358 when the Hebrew calendar was established. Hebrew calendar, by the way, is also a very important issue, as we know, in Karaitism. And the Hebrew calendar was basically the quote-unquote Hebrew calendar of Hillel II, was basically a revamping of the Babylonian calendar. And as such, it is very, I won't say very, but it's very problematic for reasons we've discussed in other talks. Over the centuries, attempts have been made to revive the institution, such as the Grand Sanhedrin, convened by Napoleon Bonaparte, and modern attempts in Israel. Okay. Let's go ahead a little bit, and we're going to look at the history of the Sanhedrin. So the first historic mention of a Sanhedrin occurs in the Psalms of Solomon. This is not to be confused with any book of the Tanakh. The Psalms of Solomon is in what's called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha, or the Sfarim Chitzoniim, are books that were written after the Tanakh was closed, was canonized, and they're not considered in any way, shape, or form to be canonical. They're not considered to be part of the Tanakh. Okay, so the Hasmonean court in Judea, presided over by Alexander Jannaeus until 76 BCE, followed by his wife Queen Salome. Alexander was called Sanhedrin or Sanhedrin. The exact nature of this early Sanhedrin is not clear. It may have been so. Alexander Jannaeus lived from 103 BCE to 76 BCE. So we're talking about around 100 BCE is when this institution called the Sanhedrin was first established. It may have been a body of sages or priests or a political, legislative, or judicial institution. The first historical record of the body was during the administration of Aulus Gabinius, who, according to Josephus, organized 5 synhedra in 57 BCE, as Roman administration was not concerned with religious affairs unless sedition was suspected. Okay, so what is a Sanhedrin? Okay, the first historical record speaks about these Sanhedrins, these local Sanhedrins, being established not by the Jews as some kind of fulfillment of the laws of the Torah, but by the Romans. The Romans had come in 63 BCE, and they had, with the help of the Pharisees, who were rising, had already risen in prominence by then, were essentially invited in to take over the land of Israel from the second independent state of Israel, the Hasmonean dynasty. The Romans came in and took over Israel, and so now Israel became a Roman province in 63 BCE. And then in 57 BCE, it's the Romans who established these Sanhedrin, these Sanhedria, these 5 Sanhedria, Synhedra, in 57 BCE, as Roman administration was not concerned with religious affairs unless sedition was suspected. In other words, let the Jews, we don't need to administer every aspect of the Jews' life. Let them administer. It's basically a form of a certain amount of autonomy, of limited autonomy for the Jews. Let them do their stupid Jewish thing, in the Romans' eyes. As long as they don't cause us problems, we don't care. As long as they're not revolting, rebelling, not paying their taxes, we don't care what they do. They can, they can do whatever they want to do, as long as they behave themselves. Okay. Only after the destruction of the Second Temple was the Sanhedrin made up only of sages. Josephus, I'm just checking on any comments here. So Josephus describes, so we know who Josephus is. Josephus wrote during the revolt against Rome, which lasted for was it 3 years, 67 CE until 70 CE, when the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans. So he's writing just a bit before the year 70 CE. He was a historian. He had been a Pharisee. He was captured by the Romans, and he basically became a Roman historian, or a Roman-sponsored historian of the events of the time, and before he wrote a number of different books, very famous. So Josephus, so we're talking about someone who wrote about in the year approximately 70 CE, okay? Josephus describes the Sanhedrin for the first time in connection with the decree of the Roman governor of Syria, Aulus Gabinius, who abolished the constitution and the then existing form of government of Judea, and divided the country into 5 provinces, at the head of each of which a Sanhedrin was placed. Jerusalem was the seat of one of these. Later, Josephus describes Herod, who, by the way, built the Western Wall. If you visit the Western Wall, you're visiting a structure that was built by Herod. And at the time, the governor of Galilee, later became king of the Jews, as being summoned before the Sanhedrin, led by High Priest Hyrcanus II, due to having executed alleged criminals without permission from the Sanhedrin. Eventually, though, Herod would go on to kill many members of the Sanhedrin. Oh, so he finally did something worthwhile, Herod. Okay, the Mishnah describes the Sanhedrin in this period further. The Great Sanhedrin met in the Hall of Hewn Stones in the Temple of Jerusalem. So the Great Sanhedrin, it says, we know in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 9. Let me bring this up very quickly. Go back to 1 Kings. So Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 9. I'll just read it in English. There's no reason. I just want to go through quickly, okay? Should we do the Hebrew? No, I'll just read it in English for now, okay? So if cases come before your courts that are too difficult for you to judge, or the bloodshed, lawsuits, or assaults, take them to the place the Lord your God will choose, okay? So in other words, these verses, I really should go to the Hebrew. No, I don't want to get focused too much on this. We'll get to it. We get to it eventually when we study Deuteronomy. So these verses here establish exactly the way the court system was supposed to work in ancient Israel. So there was a hierarchy of judges. We know this goes all the way back to Exodus chapter 17, I believe it is, when Jethro advises Moses to set up. He says to Moses, you cannot judge all of the nation by yourself. It's too much of a burden upon yourself. You'll waste away if you do so. So set up a hierarchy of judges. And that's exactly what Moses does. And then this is kind of codified here in Deuteronomy chapter 17. So we have a hierarchy of judges. Basically, we have local courts, and then we have a Supreme Court, kind of what you have in the United States. So in the United States, in the federal system, you have the district courts, then you have the circuit courts of appeal, and then you have the Supreme Court. So there are 3 levels, right? If you are tried in a federal court, and then it's going to be tried in one of the district courts, federal district courts. If you appeal, it will go to a court of appeals, a circuit court of appeals, one of which I think there are, I can't remember exactly how many, a number of them throughout the United States. And then if that's appealed again, then it will go to the Supreme Court of the United States, which sits in the place that George Washington chose to have his name dwell, something like that. At any rate, it's similar in ancient Israel. You had local courts in the gates, which means in the local cities, right? In the gates, literally is a reference to the gate in city walls. Important cities in ancient times had walls around them, and those walls had gates to go in and out. So if you were going in and out of the city, you had to go through the gate. There's no other way to get in and out of the city. I don't know, maybe you had a secret tunnel you dug. But otherwise, you went in and out of the gate. And so once you walked into the gate of the city, that was kind of the town square of ancient Israel, and not just of ancient Israel, of the ancient Near East, and far beyond that as well. Okay, so when it speaks about judges in your gates, it's referring to the local judges that presided in the town square of important cities. Okay, so if the local judges can't judge a case, it's too difficult, then it essentially gets appealed or gets kicked up to the Supreme Court. So you go to the Levitical priests, okay, and to the judge who is in office at the time. Notice it doesn't say the judges who are in office at the time. There's no panel of judges here. There's a specific judge. We see that throughout the book of Judges. We have different judges. We have Joshua, then we have Othniel, we have Tola, we have Gidon, we have Dvorah as a judge. We have Samson, Shimshon was a judge. These were all judges in the book of Judges. They judged over Israel. When the institution of the judge was essentially disbanded, and this is spoken about in the end of the second book of Samuel, when the nation clamored for a king, then the king became the judge. One of the first things, when we're going to study in a little while, First Kings, the book of First Kings, if we get to it, and we see that one of the first things that Solomon does when he assumes the kingship is judge. He judges the people. He judges the famous case of the two prostitutes, one of whose babies dies, and then King Solomon makes the famous judgment. He says, "Bring a sword," and threatens to cut the baby in half. And the one who is the true mother of the living baby says, "Stop! Just give the baby to the other woman." And Solomon knew that this was the real mother, right? Which reminds me of a joke. No, I'm not going to tell a joke now. I wish I had more time. At any rate, so we see there's a single judge. David judged Israel. Solomon judged Israel. After that, in the north, we really didn't have any good kings. In the south, in the kingdom of Judah, there were some good kings, and but whether they were good or bad kings, they were the judges. We see this throughout the Tanakh, that the final decision of innocence and guilt and punishment lay with the king. So there's no panel of judges anywhere in the Tanakh and the Torah. One could try to claim that the elders, the Skenim, were some kind of panel of judges, but they were not. They served more as an advisory role, not as a role of judges. Okay, certainly not as a panel of judges. Some of the elders may have been individual judges, but there was no concept of a panel of judges. Okay. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decisions they give you at the place that Yahweh will choose. Be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. Act according to whatever they teach you and the decisions they give you. So you either go to a Levitical priest, meaning a Kohen, or you go to a Shofet, you go to a judge. When would you go to a Kohen? When would you go to a judge? Well, it would seem logical from the context that the Kohen, they were experts in certain things, right? Matters more of, I guess you can call them religious matters. The details of the sacrifices, the details of purity and impurity, how one enters into purity, how one exits purity. We learned a lot about this in when we studied the book of Leviticus. And if it were something more, shall we say, civil, not civil, that's not the right word. If it's something that was not specifically religious, so I guess secular, such as stealing, murder, and so on, then this would go to the judge. If it got kicked up to the Supreme Court, then it would go to the judge who was in office at the time. The last judge in Israel was who? It was Samuel. Shmuel was the last judge in Israel. He was also a prophet. So we see judges were prophets. We see Moses was the first judge over Israel, and he was a prophet. And we see, in fact, that when he couldn't decide cases, such as in the case of the daughters of Tzalafchad, such as in the case of the gatherer of the wood on Shabbat, such as the case of the blasphemer of the name of God, that he actually kicked it one step higher. He asked Yahweh himself to render a judgment. So that's why it was so important in ancient times that judges would also be prophets, because there's one further level beyond the Supreme Court, which was Yahweh himself. Yahweh was accessible at the time through prophecy, perhaps through the Urim and Tumim, to render judgment when the head judge, when the Supreme Court judge, not judges, Supreme Court judge, could not render a verdict correctly, or didn't feel he had enough wisdom, information, knowledge to render the verdict. Okay, you must act according to the decisions they give you at the place Yahweh will choose. Be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. Act according to whatever they teach you and the decisions they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you to the left or the right. Anyone who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering there to Yahweh your God, again, and say the panel of judges, okay? It doesn't say panel of priests. It says the judge, the priest, okay, is to be put to death. You must purge the evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid and will not be contemptuous again. And then we go right after that into the king, because after the judges comes the king. That's exactly what happened at the end of the second book of Samuel. The people were being defeated in battle. They wanted a king. They wanted someone who had more of the physical trappings of a king, like the surrounding nations. We won't get into that right now, but let's go back a little bit more to the Sanhedrin. Let me check in here, see if there's any comments. So back to the Sanhedrin. The Mishnah describes the Sanhedrin in this period further. And which period are we talking about? We're basically talking about the period leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, the Mishnah describes the Sanhedrin in this period. So we're talking about first century CE. The Great Sanhedrin met in the Hall of Hewn Stones in the Temple in Jerusalem. It convened every day except festivals and Shabbat. Its members included priests, Levites, and ordinary Jews whose families had a pure lineage such that their daughters were allowed to marry priests, etc. Christianity, we can skip this part. We know that the Sanhedrin was involved in, at least according to the New Testament, was involved in sentencing Jesus to death. If I remember my New Testament correctly. Let me say once again that I am not in any way, shape, or form a Christian or a Messianic Jew in that context. Never have been, never will. I just need to point this out, because something will quote the New Testament as a historical document. And as people who know me well know, I don't have anything against the historical figure Jesus of Nazareth. I think a lot of what he said was correct, and really he was almost kind of a Karaite leaning, or a Karaite. If I have any problem with him at all, it's that he thought he was the Messiah, or he thought he was God, or the Son of God. He thought he was some kind of a special person who was the Messiah over Israel and the Son of God. That's explicit in the New Testament. To me, that's kind of like what's going on with Chabad, where they believe that their dead Rebbe is also some kind of future Messiah over Israel. So, I mean, Chabad Judaism has a lot of similarities, unfortunately, to early Christianity, and that's why I just can't stand Chabad for that reason, to be 100% honest. At any rate, right. But I will sometimes, as an historical document, quote the New Testament. I will sometimes quote the sayings of Jesus of Nazareth, again, to show what the idea of a Karaite leaning person at that time believed. But I have more than that. I have no connection whatsoever to this person, Jesus of Nazareth. I don't believe he's God, Son of God. I don't believe he was past Messiah over Israel, not future Messiah over Israel, not present Messiah over Israel, or anything like that. Just an interesting historical figure who turned out to be very important in world history for whatever reason. Okay. So we want to go on here. How much longer does this go on? I think we have enough. I think we get the idea, right? So the main point is that the Sanhedrin, which so many quote unquote, messianic or Messiah-leaning Jews in Israel are dying to establish, is something that I am dead set against establishing. I don't want to see anything like a Sanhedrin ever established once again in the land of Israel. A Sanhedrin was established, as we saw, by the Romans, as to give the Jews a certain amount of autonomy. It went against the concept in the Torah of a single judge adjudicating a case. It went against the hierarchy of judges spoken about in the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 17, although there was, I guess you could say, a hierarchy of Sanhedria. It was the lesser Sanhedrin and the great Sanhedrin, but nonetheless, in the Torah, this hierarchy is individual judges, not a panel of judges. And later on, it became infested with Pharisees. It essentially became a Pharisaic institution, although earlier in its history, it had Sadducees and Pharisees. Eventually, the Sadducees disappeared. The Pharisees took over, and it basically became a body with some force to enforce Pharisaic/rabbinical rule within the land of Israel. And so therefore, and when rabbinical Jews today say they want to reestablish the Sanhedrin, that's essentially what they mean. They essentially mean that they want to reestablish a Talmudic caliphate over the people of Israel here in the land of Israel. And that is the last thing on planet Earth that I want. And that is the last thing on planet Earth that most Israelis want. And believe me, they will not put up with it. It will be blood on the streets before the average Israeli is going to allow Sanhedrin to be reestablished in this country. So enough said about that. There's a lot more I could say about it. No, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on to the next topic that we're going to be discussing today? Hope you guys are enjoying the study so far. And we'll move on to a different topic. So I listed as a topic here before we get into Leviticus chapter 23. We spoke a little bit about establishing Karaite community here in Katsrin. Again, I want to encourage what I did this past week, and this was something a long time in coming, is basically what I did is we had a WhatsApp group, and this WhatsApp group was a WhatsApp discussion group for people who of Qara'im. And for years, I've been asking people in that group to donate money, free donations. Please donate when you can donate. And I'm not, as I mentioned last week, I'm not a very materialistic person. I'm quite the opposite. Anybody who knows me knows that to be a fact, not just now, but for decades and decades and decades. I'm not a materialistic person, and I relied on the goodwill of people in that group to support the World Alliance of Qara'im, because I have a lot of plans, and we need a budget for those plans. And I found out that most of them, all of them basically, were not interested in doing that. They wanted to blow off their big mouths, jabbering about all kinds of things and chatting. But every time I politely asked, please, donate a little bit here, donate a little bit there, they would never do it. So I decided I had enough of this. And I decided that it's not good to be materialistic in this world, but it's also not good to be completely non-materialistic in this world, because in this world, we require money to make the world go round. Sorry about that. We don't live in heaven at this point. We live in the real world, and in the real world, we need budgets. So I took everyone, I chucked them all out of the group. Every single one of them. Every single one of these freeloaders, these that like to blabber off their mouth, I chucked them out of the group. And I said, you want to come back in the group? Well, from now on, There's a monthly fee. You can go sign up. You can go sign up to become a member, a paying member of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and then you'll get entrance to the group. And so I'm taking a lot more of a when it comes to raising budget and raising money. I'm not pretending that I can rely on the goodwill of people to do so, because I find that when push comes to shove, that they don't put their money where their mouth is. So that's what I did, and I'm very happy with that decision. So far, a couple of people have trickled back into the group and have decided, yes, I do want to pay my dues, but most of them have disappeared, and good riddance. Goodbye. See you later. Sayonara. See you later, alligator. If you don't want to, if you don't want to support the material needs of the community, then go find another community. At any rate, I don't want to focus, as I said, I don't want to focus and linger on money, but I am asking everyone who gets value out of the World Alliance of Qara'im to please start contributing. Contribute what you can. These Shabbat studies will always remain free, at least for this foreseeable future. I don't have any plans to not make them free at this point. But if you enjoy the Shabbat studies, then please consider becoming a paid member of the World Alliance of Qara'im. I'm not going to post the link here, but you can look at the links in the descriptions in Facebook. I'll post the link here very briefly. Hold on a second. I will post it. Where'd it go? One second. Patreon. Okay. Okay. So please visit our Patreon page and become a paying member. It's not that much. You probably pay more for YouTube each month or for your cell plan each month. And without money, we cannot do the many things that I would like to do. Also, I think I'm back. Also, please consider tithing, or encourage everyone who gets value out of the World Alliance of Qara'im. It's very traditional in communities across the world to tithe, to give 10% of your income to an organization. And I would ask you to please strongly consider giving that 10% to the World Alliance of Qara'im. The money will not go to waste. The only thing I will buy with it, I said, is some good coffee. I'm very much a coffee fanatic, a coffee nerd, a coffee elitist, whatever you want to call it. So yes, you've been forewarned. Some of your money is going to buy some good coffee, but other than that, it's going to first and foremost allow me to spend a lot more time and put a lot more effort into teaching, administrative tasks of the World Alliance of Qara'im, etc. So please consider tithing. And if you have a donation that you would like to donate, there are ways to do it. I'm not going to post the links here. You can look at the description. And I'm asking everybody who gains value out of the World Alliance of Qara'im to not be like those freeloaders who sat in the group for 5 years and never donated a single dime, but to please put your money where your mouth is and join as a member, tithe, and donate. If you have a nice chunk of money somewhere, then we'll take part of it. We'll be happy to take some of it off your hands. I'm being facetious, but I'm being serious now. I really spent too many years not focusing on the practical aspects of running this organization, of just thinking that, Yahweh is just going to lead it on fumes and thin air. But the reality is, as I said, we do live in the real world, and in the real world, we need money to get things done, right? As a friend of mine who just spent a long time, spent over here in the Far East, is that the well-known phrase in the Far East is no money, and not the honey type that you eat. I mean, well, not the liquid. I better stop before I get myself in trouble. No money, no honey. That's what they say in the Far East. Okay, so please let's take this seriously, and let's please help everybody. Let's everybody do their part to make the World Alliance of Qara'im stronger, to set up our first physical community here in the land of Israel, and hopefully establish other communities around the world, and to to do a lot more of the things that I have planned, including setting up a place of learning, yeshiva, a Karaite yeshiva, setting up Karaite schools, and so on and so forth. Okay, enough said about that. We're now going to move on to the other topic, or the second topic that I wanted to cover. I'll put on a bit of music for a second. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on? Anybody? Okay. I don't want to turn into one of those televangelist types. But don't you guys don't force me to do it, guys. Okay. All right. Because I'll do it. I will do it. You've been warned. I'll start talking like what's the guy's name? Joel whatever. You guys are not going to want to hear that, believe me. Okay. Let's get some music going, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about this topic that I mentioned, vendettas in the Torah. Very interesting. When David is on his deathbed, the commands he gives to Solomon and how Solomon carries them out. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we take a quick break? All right. And we'll see you back in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to put a little bit of music on.
שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ופועלך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אני אתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך.
עיניי אל הוד
Me'ayin, me'ayin, yobo yezri. Esu einay, ele'omorim. Me'ayin, me'ayin, yobo yezri. Ezri. Me'im Hashem, Oiseh, Shemayim Moretz, Karararam, 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 Karariraram. Esu einay, ele'omorim. Me'ayin, me'ayin, yobo yezri. Karararam, karararararararam, Ezri, Me'im Hashem, Oiseh, Shemayim Moretz, Karararam, 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 Karariraram. Shemayim Moretz.
Okay, we are back. One second, please. Okay, so we are back, and let's talk about our second topic today. And our second topic is about vendettas in the Torah. So we have a very interesting bunch of verses. I wish I had more time. I'd go into more detail, but let's look at the Hebrew. And let's see what David tells his son Solomon on his deathbed. Let me get rid of that. Let's bring it up. Window. There we go. So we are in 1 Kings chapter 2. And we're going to start at the beginning of this chapter. I'm going to read in the Hebrew and I'll translate, and then we'll analyze it. Okay. Wa'yikrevu yemei David lamut. So the days of David to die, David's time to die came close. Wa'yisau et Shlomo beno lemor, and he commanded his son Solomon, saying, say, verse 2. Please follow along in whatever language you wish, in English or whatever language you feel comfortable with. If you can follow along with the Hebrew on one side and the English on the other side, that's even better. Verse 2, Anochi holech b'derech kol ha'aretz. I'm going the way of all the land. Meaning, I'm going to die, right? The way of all human beings is to die. V'hazakta v'hayita la'ish. And so you shall be strong, strengthen yourself, and be like a man. Let's go here, up here. So in verse 3, this is 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 3. V'shamarta et mishmeret Yahweh Elohecha lolechet b'derachau. You shall keep the guard, keep the what's a good word in English? What did they translate here as? The charge. Okay, we'll go with that. Fine. You shall keep the charge of Yahweh, your God, lalechet b'derachav, and to go in his ways. V'shmor chukotau, to keep his statutes, mitzvotau, his commandments, umishpatau, his judgments, wa'edotau, his witnesses. That's a better translation. Testimonies. Okay, we'll go with that. Kakatuv b'torat Moshe, as is written in the instructions of Moses. Lim'an taskil et kol asher ta'aseh wa'et kol asher tifnei sham, in order that you shall succeed, or you shall be wise and you shall be knowledgeable in all that you do and all that you turn towards. Okay, so basically David is saying this is David's deathbed charge to his son Solomon, and he's saying that he's going to die, and keep the ways of Yahweh, keep the ways of God, go in his ways, keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, his testimonies, in order that you shall be successful or wise. Here they say prosper, they translate it as all that you do and all that you turn yourself towards. Okay. Verse 4. Lim'an yakim Yahweh et divaro asher diber alai. In order, up to here, in order that Yahweh shall establish his word, asher diber alai, which he spoke to me, lemor, im yishmeru banecha vanecha et darkom lalechet lifanai be'emet. So if your children, your sons, shall keep Ishmaru, shall be careful of their ways, lalechet lifanai, and go before me, be'emet, in truth, bechol levavam, with all of their hearts, bechol nafsham, and all of their essence, all of their being, lemor, lo yikaret lecha ish me'al kisei Israel. Then never will a man, never will any, how can we translate this? Never will a man from the throne of Israel be cut off for you. In other words, you will all your dynasty will be an everlasting dynasty. Okay, it will never be a case that that one of your descendants will not sit upon the throne of Israel. So this is what David is saying to Solomon. David is saying to Solomon, follow the ways of Yahweh, follow the ways of God, because God has told me that if my descendants will follow the ways will follow his ways and walk before him, then this dynasty, the house of David, will remain as an eternal dynasty over Israel. Did that happen? No, of course it did not happen. We see the dynasty. First of all, we see the kingdom split after the death of Solomon, and eventually, we see the Davidic dynasty actually does not even stay permanent within the southern kingdom, within Judah, which is David's stronghold, which is David's own tribe, right? David's from the tribe of Yehuda, through his father Yishai, through his father Jesse, who can ultimately trace his roots. Back to Boaz when Boaz married Ruth. That's spoken about in the book of Ruth. Okay, from the tribe of Judah. Okay. So now we get to the part of the vendetta. Okay, so after David tells Solomon to keep the ways of Yahweh, then David commands his son Solomon regarding certain people who David would like Solomon to take care of. So verse 5, Wiram Ata Yodata et asher asali Yoav ben Tzeruya. Also, you know that which Yoav ben Tzeruya did to me. And we'll talk about what he did to him in a second. Asher asali shnei sarei tzevaot Yisrael, who did to the two heads of the armies of Israel, LaAvner ben Ner, uLaAmasa ben Yeter. So what did Yoav ben Tzeruya? So Yoav ben Tzeruya was the head of David's army, still is at this point the head of David's army, although he defected to David's other son Adoniah, who attempted to stage a coup and take over the kingship. That's spoken about in the first chapter of First Kings. But up until that time, Yoav ben Tzeruya was the head of David's army. He was basically the Secretary of Defense, or the chief of staff of the army. Okay, the top general in the army. Let me just grab water for 1 second. Excuse me. Drink it. Okay, so this guy, so Yoav ben Tzeruya was the one who actually conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites and did many other things as chief of the army of David. But he did a couple of things which were basically murder. Okay, so the first thing that David refers to is that he killed two innocent people. Okay, these two innocent people were Avner ben Ner, and right here, Avner ben Ner, Avner the son of Ner, and Amasa the son of Yeter. Okay, we are game isem demei milchama b'shalom, and he killed them, placing the blood of war upon peace. In other words, he brought war. He brought blood upon, or he brought war upon peaceful people who did not deserve it. Right? It's figuratively saying killed innocent men. Okay. V'yitin demei milchama b'chagorato. He placed the blood of war in his how do you translate not, oh God, what's the name? Sash? No, how do they translate it again? Belt, I guess. Okay, belt. He placed the blood of war in his belt. Asher ben motnav, which was upon his loins. Uben alo asher beraglav. Right. So this is and I'm sorry, I should translate that. And upon his shoe, which is and in his shoe, which is upon his feet. In other words, he stained with blood. He's blood stained from his waist down to his feet, basically from his head to his toe. This is David's figurative way of saying that, hey, David's figurative way of saying that Yoav ben Tzruya, by killing these two innocent men, Avner ben Ner and Amasa ben Yeter, is stained in their innocent blood, in the blood of these innocent men. Okay? Verse 6. Where asita kichach matecha ulo tored sevato b'shalom sheol. And you shall do according to your wisdom, according to your wiseness. And you shall not bring their, this is usually sevato, literally means their white hair or their white haired head. Hey, Shoham, I'm going to put you outside. Maybe 1 second, please. I'm sorry. Get outside. It's getting a little bit too restless. And in fact, I'll be right back in 1 second. Go. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Okay. You shall do according to your wisdom. Shall not bring his white-haired head down into the grave in peace. In other words, you're going to go take care of Yoav ben Tzruya. Okay. Let's stop right there and let's ask, what did Yoav ben Tzruya do to deserve this? And first of all, who is Yoav ben Tzruya? Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So for that, just again, Rabbi Kippur, and just give a brief overview of who is this Yoav ben Tzruya, who was related, and it's very interesting, that Yoav ben Tzruya was related to David by David's mother's side, or by Yoav's mother. Oh, let's read, okay? So Yoav, son of Tzruya, was a nephew of King David and the commander of his army according to the Hebrew Bible. So Yoav was the son of Tzruya, a sister of King David, and that's spoken about in First Chronicles, okay? So it's very interesting here. We see something very interesting. Let me just make sure this is being projected on the screen. Yes, it is. We see something very interesting. Septic fuddy. Oh my lordy. We see something very interesting on this regarding Yoav Tzruya. So usually in Tanakh, people are designating their name and the name of their father. Okay. So Shlomo ben David, Solomon, the son of David. But here Yoav is actually designated by his mother. Okay. So Yoav is always called Yoav ben Tzruya. And it was his mother's name it was his mother who was named Tzruya. And why is this the case? The case is the reason is stated right here. Tzruya was King David's sister. That's spoken about in First Chronicles chapter 2. Okay, so we see that it's very interesting because we see that the Torah is a bit more contextual and flexible than modern modes of thinking. and that many more than many people think it is. Okay, so yes, generally people are designated by their name and the name of their father. Okay, but here we have someone being designated by their name and the name of their mother, because their mother happens to be the important one in this case, because Tsuruya, Yoav's mother, David's sister. That's how Yoav got the job. It was nepotism, basically, right? It was a family business. Okay, Yoav is David's nephew. Okay, according to Josephus, who we can't rely on, his name is called. Sorry, we have no idea. We don't know what Yoav's father's name was because he's always called Yoav ben Tsuruya. Okay. Okay, so here we get to this incident. So Yoav had two brothers, Avishai and Asahel. Asahel was killed by Abner in combat, for which Yoav took revenge by murdering Abner against David's wishes. And shortly after, David and Abner had secured peace between the house of David and the house of Saul. And this is spoken about in 2 Samuel chapters 2 and 3. Let's take a look at that. We're going to go to 2 Samuel 2. Verse 13. Let me bring it up right now. And I think I'll just go through this in the English just to make it speed through a little bit. And I'm sorry, where was that again? 2 Samuel 2. And if we need to refer to verses in the Hebrew, we will. Okay, so it's a very interesting story. So this is regarding the war between the houses of David and Saul, right? So Saul, let me just, right, okay, so let's start here, okay, in verse 13. We'll start here in verse 12. So Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishboshet, son of Shaul, of Saul, left Machanaim and went to Givon. Joab, son of Tsuruya, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Givon. One group sat down on one side of the pool, and one group sat down on the other side. Then Abner said to Yoav, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." Okay, so we see now here's Abner ben Ner and Yoav. Yoav is the one who Abner is the one who Yoav kills. That's what's mentioned when King Solomon speaks about against. Okay, right here. Where was it? Right. This is right here. So the Abner ben Ner. Okay. So here, Abner and Yoav are together. Okay, Abner belongs to the house of, or is aligned with Saul, with Shaul, and Yoav is aligned with David. Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us. All right, let them do it, Yoav says. So they stood up and were counted off, 12 men for Benjamin and Ishboshet, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gimon was called Chadkat Hazurim. Okay, so we see here that so there were 12 men for each side, and they all killed each other. All 24 died. They all shoved their swords into each other, and they all died. The battle that off a larger between the Saul and the house of David. So that the battle of the Lights were defeated by David's men. Okay, so here we have Abner ben Ner. He's defeated by David. The three sons of Tsuruya, and now we come to Yoav, the son of Tsuruya. Again, Tsuruya was David's sister. Yoav, therefore, who became the head of David's army, was David's nephew. Yoav, Avishai, and Asahel. Now, Asahel was as fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left, and he pursued him. Okay, so we have Asahel, the brother of Yoav, the head of David's army, the nephew of David, Yoav, whose mother was Suriyah, who is David's sister, has a brother named Asahel, who is very fast, fleet-footed, and he chases after Abner. So this is Abner's from the house aligned with the house of Saul, and Asahel is, of course, aligned with his brother David. Okay, so now Asahel from the house of David is chasing Abner, turning neither to the right nor the left, and he pursued him. Abner looked behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" So Abner's running away from Asahel. "It is," he answered, meaning Asahel answered. Then Abner said to him, "Turn to the right or to the left, take one of the young men and strip him of his weapons." But Asahel would not stop chasing him. So Asahel continues. Abner's saying, "Stop, enough." Okay, Abner is no slouch either. Okay, Abner is a warrior in Saul's army, in Shaul's army. So turn to the right or the left, take one of the young men and strip him of his weapons. But Asahel would not stop chasing him. Again, Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to give up the pursuit, so Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach. So remember, Asahel, Joab is running behind Abner ben Ner, with the house of Saul, and Abner is warning him again and again, "Stop chasing after me, stop chasing after me," right? Abner at this point had a right to defend himself. He has this guy Asahel chasing after him, trying to kill him. So Abner, who's in front of Asahel, takes his spear and shoves it backwards into Asahel's stomach, right? Takes a spear, turns it around, shoves it right into, the butt of his spear. So the back part of his spear shoves into Asahel's stomach, and it comes out through his back because they're running quickly. He fell there and died on the spot, and every man stopped when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. So basically, Abner ben Ner, rightfully so, or it's within his right at this point because he's defending himself against Asahel. He's given Asahel, Yoav's brother, a number of warnings, but Asahel will not stop pursuing him. So Abner finally says, "I have to defend myself." He takes the butt of his spear, thrusts it backwards, and kills Asahel, who's Joab's brother. Joab is going to want a vendetta against Abner ben Ner. Okay, but Joab and Avishai pursued Abner. So now Joab and Avishai. Okay, remember that's the other brother. So now there are two brothers left. They find out that their brother Asahel has been killed by Abner ben Ner. And they go after him. They basically search him out. And as the sun was setting, they came into the hill of Ammah, near Gia, on the way to the wasteland of Gibon. Gibon was the same place where that original battle between the 12 young men of David's army and the 12 young men of Saul's army had that battle where they all killed each other. Then the men of Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on top of the hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites?" So Abner's is now calling out to Joab to stop the madness. Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing them to the morning." And then the battle between David and Saul temporarily stops. Okay, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. 2 Samuel chapter 3. And let's see. I don't have time to go through the whole story, but let's see if we can go down to here. Okay. Basically, Abner, who remember was on the side of Saul, and Ishbosheth, his concubine, accuses Abner, and Abner gets very angry. Abner was very angry because of what Ishbosheth said, so he answered, "On my dog's head on Judah's side. This very day I'm loyal to the house of your father Saul and to his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David, yet you now accuse me of offense involving this woman." Basically, at this point, Abner ben Ner now defects to the house, from the house of Saul to the house of David. Okay? So now Yoav and Avner in the same camp. Yoav and Avner in the same camp. Remember, Yoav's brother Asahel has been killed by Avner. Avner was defending himself, and then Avner, who was still on the side of Saul, and Yoav decided to stop the fighting that had gone too far. It's just going to cause death and destruction for no reason. But then, at a situation, and Yoav are back in more close connection, more close quarters. Just then, David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Avner was no longer with David in Hebron because David had sent them away and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Avner, the son of Ner, had come to the king and that the king had sent them away and that he had gone in peace. So now Yoav knows where Avner is. So Yoav went to the king and said to him, "What have you done? Look, Avner came to you. Why did you go?" Whoa. I don't know what that was. Okay. So Yoav went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Avner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Avner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you are doing." Okay. So now Yoav is trying to undermine, is trying to tell David that Avner defected to David because he's a spy, really, for the side of David. So Joab left David and sent messengers after Avner, but they brought him back from the cistern at Sirah. But David did not know it. When Avner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber as if to speak with him privately, and there to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach and he died. So now Avner ben Ner, who defected to the side of David, was pursued, or Joab went to find him under the guise of saying to David that he believed that Avner was actually a spy from the side of Saul, even though Avner had actually defected to the side of David, to David's side. And then Joab finds him. Again, let's read these verses. Let's look at this in the Hebrew. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse starting in 26. Let's grab the Hebrew for this. Give it a second to come up. Okay. Verse 26. Why? You say Yoav Ma'im David. So Yoav went away from David, went out from David. Why Yishlach Mal Achim Achare Avner, and he sent messengers to Avner. Why Yashivu Oto Mibor Hasira, and he returned and he brought them, and they, meaning the messengers, brought him back, meaning Avner ben Ner, Mibor Hasira, from the cistern of Sirah. With David lo yada, and David didn't know anything about it. David didn't know that Avner had sent out, basically dispatched an expedition to capture and bring back Avner ben Ner, right? So Yoav had since Avner had killed his brother, Yoav had in his mind to take revenge and kill Avner. Okay, verse 27. Why Yashav Avner Hebron? Why Yatehu Yoav El Toch HaSha'ar? So Avner came back to Hebron. Why Yatehu Avner El Toch HaSha'ar? And Yoav brought him aside into the gate, the Deberito, under the guise of wanting to speak to him. Basheli. Basheli means in private. Wayakehu Sham Homesh Wayamat. And he slayed him there, struck him there in the stomach, and he died. Basically, to speak to him privately, he stabs him in the stomach and he dies. Okay? V'yamat b'dam asa elachiv, because of the blood that he had, because of his brother's blood that he'd spilled. In other words, because of the brother's Asahel's blood that Avner ben Ner had spilled. Okay, verse 28. Yishma David me achrechen, and David found out about this afterwards. Why Yomer Naki Anochi Umamlachti, and he says, I and my kingdom, I and my kingship, I and my throne are innocent. Naki Anochi Mamlachim im Yahweh, before Yahweh. Okay, Ad Olam, forever, for eternity, midme Abner ben Ner, from the blood of Abner ben Ner. In other words, what is declaring, he has absolutely no knowledge of this. He has nothing to do with this. He had no idea what was going on. He did not dispatch Yoav. He did not order the killing of Abner ben Ner. He knew absolutely nothing about it. He only found out after the fact, and therefore he is completely innocent of the spilling of his blood because he had absolutely nothing to do with it. This is what David is declaring. Okay, verse 29. Yahulu al Rosh Yoav el kol beit aviv. So let this fall upon the head of Joab, and all of the house and all of his father's house. In other words, who's responsible? Who is responsible for this innocent blood being spilled? The death of Abner ben Ner, who all he was doing was defending himself after giving multiple warnings to Joab's brother Asael. Then, in self-defense, he killed Yoav's brother Asael by stabbing him, by thrusting the spear behind him through his stomach and killing him. Okay, so David is saying that it's not me or my house that's responsible, not me or my dynasty that's responsible. It is, let all of the blame fall on Abner ben Ner. I'm sorry, on Yoav ben Tzruya and all of his father's house. Okay, but Ali Karait mi beit Yoav Zav. And then basically David curses Yoav ben Tzruya. We'al yikaret mi beit Yoav Zav umit surah hu mahzik ba pelech we nofel b'cherev we hasar lachem. And now he curses the house of Yoav, and he says, may from the house of Yoav, may it never be cut off. Zav is very specifically someone who has an irregular discharge from private parts, from his penis, probably referring to some kind of STD or some other horrible disease that causes fluid to come out of the meatus, which is the technical name for the hole in the penis. Mitzurah is someone who's, it's colloquially translated as leprous. It's someone who has tzaraat. Tzaraat is, we spoke about this in detail when we learned Leviticus. Machzik ba'pelech, or someone who walks with a cane, with a staff. In other words, someone who is injured or deformed so that they cannot walk correctly. They need the help of a cane. Wanofel b'cherev, and who falls before the sword. In other words, who's put to death in war or by the sword violently. And someone who lacks. Okay, so this is a curse that to the house of Yoav ben Tzruya, to the house of his own nephew, the father's house of his own nephew. Yoav's father is not related to David, right? And basically curses him and says that David is clearly very upset against the death about the death of Abner ben Ner. Abner ben Ner had just defected to his side, had just left the house of Shaul, the house of Saul, and had defected to the side of David. And not only that, Abner ben Ner did not murder Yoav's brother Asael. As we said, he only killed Asael in self-defense when Asael would not stop pursuing him with the intent of killing him. Okay, verse 30. Yoav Avishai, and let Yoav and Avishai. Avishai is the other remaining brother. Remember, there were three brothers. There was Yoav, Avishai, and Asael. Asael is already dead, killed by Abner ben Ner. The two remaining brothers are Yoav and Avishai. Achiv, his brother. So this is a summary sentence. So this is just saying what happened. So Yoav and Avishai, his brother, Hargu Abner al asher himit et Asael. Achichem b'Giv'on b'milchama. So they killed Avner because they murdered Avner because he had killed Asael, their brother, at Givon during the war. Okay, and then David goes on to mourn for Avner, and basically David is very upset about this. Okay, so this is now when we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 3. This gives a lot more context. I'm sorry, not 2 Samuel chapter 3. 1 Kings chapter 2. This gives us a lot more context. Let's look at this again, and let's look at it this time in the Hebrew. Let's check to see if there are any comments. Oops. There we go. Okay, let's look again. We're now in 1 Kings. We're now in Jonathan, you're going? Okay. You can talk. It's all right. What's up? Take it. Come in. You can come in. Come. This is all your stuff? Just the magazine? Forbes? With what's his face on the front? I can't stand this guy. What's his name again? Jared Kushner. Okay, you have your buses all worked out?
Yeah.
You paid Rachel?
No, I'm going to do that now.
Do it now, please, and tell her that I'll give her the other 50 shekels, okay?
Sure,
All right, so we'll talk.
Okay.
All right, Shavua Tov. Okay. So let's go back now to 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 5. So this is now, once again, David commanded Solomon. So David did not want to kill Yoav himself. Why? First of all, it was his nephew, at least in the case of Solomon, that would make Solomon and Yoav cousins, first cousins. And second of all, because Yoav was, after all, the chief of David's army. So I guess he felt like in his own lifetime, he couldn't kill Avner. He couldn't kill Yoav, but he did leave the command to his son to do so. Okay. So verse 5. This is 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 5. And we'll read this again. And you also know, this is David King talking to Solomon, you also know that which Yoav, the son of Tzeruiah, my nephew, did to me, which he did to the two heads of the armies of Israel, Avner ben Ner, that's the issue we're talking about here, Amasa ben Yeter. We're not going to have time to get to the story of Amasa yet. We are game. He killed them. And he placed the blood of war in a time of peace, or he placed war upon peace. In other words, figuratively speaking, he shed innocent blood. And he placed the blood of war in his sash, in his belt, asher b'motnav, which is around his loins, ubin alo v'sheber and in his shoe, which is upon his foot. In other words, from head to toe, he has shed innocent blood. Okay, verse 6. We read this before. Let's read it again. Vasita kechachmatecha velo tored sevato b'shalom sheol. So do according to your wisdom. In other words, you're a smart guy. You know what to do about this. Okay, I can't do it. I'm restrained, both family-wise and because I have some debt to Yoav, because he was the head of the army for so many years, head of my army for so many years. But you're not stupid. You know what to do, right? Almost like mafia talk, right? You know what to do. Velo tored sevato b'shalom sheol. So do not allow his white-haired, his hoary head, they usually translate it as hoary, just means white-haired. So his old head is his white-haired head, literally b'shalom sheol, to go down to the grave in peace. In other words, this is David putting out a vendetta, putting out a fatwa. I like the word vendetta better, on Yoav ben Tzeruiah for killing this innocent person, Avner ben Ner, and one other person, Amasa ben Yeter. Verse 7. Okay, then we go into other stuff. Okay, so then it speaks about Bnei Livnei Barzilai. Because they came to David's side. This is now talking about, so these other incidents, Bnei Barzilai helped David when he was fleeing from Avshalom. Avshalom, we know, is David's son, who staged an almost successful rebellion against his father David. And Avshalom was also killed by Yoav ben Tzeruiah, right? So let's look at that for 1 second. So David had given. So this guy Yoav ben Tzruya was really problematic because David in the rebellion of Avshalom, when his son rebelled against him and David had to flee Jerusalem, he fled to the east past the Kidron Valley up through the Mount of Olives. It says explicitly, and basically out to the east. Okay, and that's where we hear about these other two people that are spoken about in these verses. But eventually, to make a long story short, I'll just read it from the Wikipedia because I'm not going to go search down the verses right now. Okay. So killing Avshalom. So Avshalom, even though Avshalom had rebelled against David, had thrown David out of Jerusalem, had slept with David's concubines on the roof of David's palace to explicitly say that he's the king now, and had assembled an army to go search out and kill David. Still, nonetheless, David had love and mercy for his own son and gave explicit commands to his army, not to kill his son Absalom. Okay, so killing Absalom was against David's explicit command. Beware. This is quoting from, where is this? 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 14 through 15. Beware that none touch the young man Absalom. Joab injured Absalom with 3 darts to the heart, and Absalom was subsequently killed by 10 of Joab's armor bearers. So it was essentially Joab, the same guy, Yoav ben Tzruya, who killed Avner ben Ner, who also killed David's own son, Avshalom, after David had given explicit orders to treat Avshalom gently, to not kill him. Okay? When David heard that Absalom was killed, although not how he was killed, he greatly sorrowed, and so on. Okay? So we see that this guy Yoav ben Tzruya was really a problematic dude, and so finally David calls for Samuel to kill him, and that's exactly what we see here. Okay, so where is Yoav killed? Right here. Okay, and again, if we go through the Hebrew, it's going to take a long time, but you know, it's such an interesting story. I think we will go Hebrew and then we'll get to Leviticus 23. Any questions, any comments so far, by the way? Anybody? Okay, so we're taking a look at 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 28. So the execution of Yoav. Okay, so now we have some more court intrigue. So David's son Adoniah has established himself as king. And let me just get the context here for 1 second. But David has made it clear that Solomon is to be king. That was a promise that he had given to Solomon's mother Bathsheba. That's the same Bathsheba that we know that bathed on the roof of her house and was seen by David, and he subsequently took her, had relations with her, and then sent her husband off to war to be killed. That was Uriah the Hittite. Uriah. Okay, so verse 28. We're in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 28. Vashmu'a ba'a ad Yoav, ki Yoav nata achrei Adoniah, ve'achrei Avshalom lo nata. So what Shmuah means, the news or the rumor. So the news came to Yoav. What news? The news came to Yoav that David had instructed Solomon to kill him, to kill Yoav. So Yoav knows now that the vendetta out against him. Okay, so first of all, I should say then David dies after he gives the last thing David does, or the last thing recorded that David does, is he sends out these vendettas against these various people. Then he dies, and David dies, and he's buried in the city of David. Not, if you ever visit Jerusalem, and there's a place called David's Tomb that's up on Mount Zion. That absolutely 100% is not David's tomb. Just as if you go to the Mount of Olives, I just recently did a video which I put up on both the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel and the Karaite Insights YouTube channel on what's called the Tomb of the Prophets. That's on the Mount of Olives. If you ever visit the Tomb of the Prophets, you should know that neither of the two prophets, Haggai and Malachi, which are claimed to be buried there, are actually buried there. Okay, so David dies and is buried in the city of David, below the Temple Mount. That's below Mount Zion. That's below the current old city of Jerusalem. If you're in Jerusalem, I highly recommend visiting the actual city of David. They've done an amazing job there in the past 10 years or so. They've made it into a fascinating place to visit. They've done a lot of more excavations there. You can see what is believed by some biblical archaeologists, or very specifically Elat Mazar, to be part of Solomon's palace. And you can see part of what is believed to be the wall of Nehemiah. Remember when Nehemiah returned from Persia, one of the first things he did is survey the walls around Jerusalem and saw that they were torn down, or so they were in great disrepair. And his first major project was to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, so you can actually touch what is believed to be part of the wall that rebuilt the wall around Jerusalem that was in Nehemiah. That's in the city of David. So I highly recommend, if you're ever in Jerusalem, to visit the city of David. They've done an amazing job. I remember visiting it 20 or 30 years ago, and it was very much in its nascent stages, I guess, as a place set up for tourists to visit. But now you could spend an entire day there, at least definitely an entire afternoon there. I highly recommend it. Okay. At any rate, so now Yoav finds out that David has issued a vendetta against him. Okay. And it says very specifically, okay, ki Yoav nata achrei Adoniah wa achrei Avshalom lo nata. Okay, so Yoav sided with Adoniah. Adoniah was another son of David who attempted to stage a coup and take over the kingship from Solomon, even though David had promised that Solomon would succeed him. But he did not. But Yoav was loyal to David during the time of the rebellion of Avshalom against David. Okay, so what did Yoav do? Yoav knows now that David is after him, that Solomon is after him. Solomon is going to kill him. Yoav el ohel Yahweh we yahazek bekarnot hamizbeach. So Yoav ran to the tent of Yahweh. Okay, remember at this point, Solomon has just taken the reins. Solomon has just become king, so there is no temple that's built yet. There's just a tent that houses the Ark of the Covenant, that houses the Ark of the Covenant and the other furniture, the bronze altar, other furniture. Right. This is when if you remember, David took the Ark up to Jerusalem, dancing and singing. Okay, so Yanas Yoav el ohel Yahweh. So Yoav went to the tent of Yahweh, meaning on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and he held onto the horns of the altar. Which altar are we talking about? There are two altars. There's the altar of incense that's inside the holy area, but that's not what's being spoken about here. We're speaking about the altar of sacrifice. It says explicitly, when it speaks about how to build the altar of sacrifices towards the end of Exodus, it says that it should be built with 4 kranot, with 4 horns. Okay, so he grabs one of those horns. If we take a look at a picture of the altar of sacrifice, let's see, then you'll see exactly what he grabbed onto. Okay. Altar of sacrifice. Let's see if we can get a picture. So there we go. There's a picture of it. Good enough. Okay, you guys can see that, I hope. Okay, so you see that on the four corners there are these horns. And that's exactly what Yoav grabbed onto. This was meant to be an act of sanctuary, right? The idea here was that by doing so, that Solomon is not going to send men into the place of God, into the house of God, or into the courtyard of God to kill him, right? There's not going to be murder. There's not going to be blood spilled, aside from the sacrificial blood, in the place where in the place where Yahweh has his name. His name is okay. So he grabs onto these horns, right? And let's see what happens. Verse 29, Wa yugad lamelech Shlomo ki nos Yoav el ohel Yahweh. So it was told to King Solomon that Yoav had fled to the tent of Yahweh, Wahine etzel hamizbeach, and that he was next to the altar. Waishlach Shlomo et Benayahu ben Yehoyada lemor lech pigabo. So he sent Benayahu, the son of Yehoyada, saying, "Go kill him." Okay. Now, if we had more time, you would see that you do not want ever to have this guy Benayahu ben Yehoyada dispatched against you. If you did, that basically meant certain death. And we see this a number of times. The other vendettas, or some of the other vendettas, are carried out by Benayahu ben Yehoyada, and Benayahu ben Yehoyada is then appointed head of the army of King Solomon. Okay, so the person who kills, so remember, Yoav ben Suruyah, who's now holding on to the horns of the sacrificial altar on the Temple Mount, hoping that blood is not going to be shed there, that he's not going to be dragged away from there, right? I think in modern days, if people don't want to be arrested, don't they go into a church? And I don't know what they grab on there. Maybe they grab onto, Jesus's, pee-pee or something like that. I have no idea, but they go into a church, and that's supposed to be an act of claiming sanctuary, right? That they're safe there. But nonetheless, Solomon dispatches Benayahu ben Yehoyada and tells him to go kill him and tells him to go kill Yoav. Okay. So once again, this is now the new head of the army under Solomon, now killing the old head of the army, Yoav. Okay, taking over essentially his position. There's something very karmic about this. There's something very full circle about this. Yoav, who was a very problematic person, did some good things, but spilled the innocent blood of Avner ben Ner, among other things, and essentially caused the death of Avshalom, David's son, even though David had explicitly said to treat Avshalom with kid gloves, is now killed by the person who's going to take his place. Okay, Yehoyada, Benayahu ben Yehoyada. This would be like, I guess, in modern Israeli politics, if God, I don't know why his name escapes me. Who's the guy who killed Yitzhak Rabin? Oh my God, I can't remember his name. At any rate, if the guy who killed Yitzhak Rabin now became the next prime minister after killing Yitzhak Rabin. Okay, lemor lech pegabo, lech berabo. Okay, verse 30. So Benayahu, again, you do not want this guy. You do not want anybody. You don't want Solomon to tell Benayahu to go out and kill you, because that's it. You're gone. Okay, El Ohel Yahweh. So Benayahu comes to the tent of Yahweh. Wa yomer elav ko amar hamelech, and he says to him, meaning Benayahu says to Yoav, ko amar hamelech. So says the king. Say, come out of here. Get out. Okay, get out of there. Wa yomer lo. And Yoav says, no, right? Notice how short the language is here, right? Yoav is not, there's nothing much to discuss here. Yoav is terrified. He's in fear for his life, rightfully so. He says, no, because I'd rather die here, or I'm going, if I die, it'll be here, okay? Here I will die. And Benayahu brought word back to the king, King Solomon at this time. Okay? Saying to the king, so this is what Yoav said, basically saying Yoav telling Solomon that, I'm sorry, Benaiah telling Solomon that Yoav refuses to let go of the horns of the altar, and I answered him. It's not clear exactly what he answered him, but that's why he's coming to Solomon to know what to answer him. Verse 31, why Yomer lo hamelech asek asher diber. So King Solomon, the king says, do as he's spoken. What has he spoken? What did Avner say? That here I will die. Okay, that's the way. If that's what he says, then do as he's spoken. There's also a certain karmic kind of thing going on there, right? Yoav says, I will die here. Okay, you will die here. That's what you want. That's where you'll die. Okay. Kashet diber u pirabo u ki varto vasirut. Okay, let's go up to here. So do as he said, bury him. Okay. והסיר רוטה דמי חינם אשר שפך יואב מעלי ומעל בית אבי, and remove the innocent blood that Yoav spilled in front of me, or regarding me and regarding the house of my father. Okay, avenge this innocent blood. In the Torah, the only way that murder is avenged is with the spilling of blood. If someone spills innocent blood, the only recompense for that is that their blood is spilled. Doesn't always happen, but that's, according to the Torah, the only way that that murder of an innocent person can be paid back. In other cases, you can make a deal, as Donald Trump might say. Okay, you can pay off if someone is just injured, or if it's a monetary issue, you can pay off with money. But in the case of murder, you cannot take a kofer. The Torah says this explicitly. You cannot pay it off with some kind of monetary compensation to forget the matter. The only way murder can be avenged is with the death, the spilling of the blood of the person who spilled the blood. Okay, verse 32. Let's go up to half the verse. How do we know where half the verse is? We can always look for what's called the etnach. It's this little wishbone symbol here. If you can see, I don't know if you see where I'm pointing. In this word here, yada. Oops. Okay, you can see under the daled, under the second letter in this word, you see that little wishbone-looking thing. That is essentially, it's called an etnach, and that's essentially a semicolon. Okay, so let's go up to the semicolon. Vayishiv Yahweh et bamo al rosho asher paga b'shnei anashim sadikim ve'tovim yanu. Let's translate up to there. Yahweh has Wahishiv. So this is really to be translated, and Yahweh will have at that point. In other words, when you go kill Yoav, then Yahweh will, in your doing so, Yahweh will have returned his blood upon his head. Right, that's the expression that's used when revenge is taken. Okay, when rightful revenge is taken. Asher paga b'shnei anashim tzadikim, because he killed two men, tzadikim v'tovim mimenu, who were more righteous and better than he was. Wa yaharem b'cherev wa avi David lo yada, and he killed them with his sword, and my father David knew nothing about this. Again, Solomon emphasizing the fact that his father David did not know at all about the deaths of Avner ben Ner, or had nothing to do with the deaths of Avner ben Ner, and where was it again? And the other guy whose name escapes me at the moment. Okay, we'd have to go back if we went to that story. At any rate, okay. Here it is. Et Avner ben Ner, Tzva Yisrael. So the Avner ben Ner, the head of the army of Israel. Wa et Amasa ben Yeter sa Tzva Yehuda, and Amasa, the son of Yeter, the head of the armies of Yehuda. Okay, verse 33. Again, we're in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 33. Shavu lemehem berosh Yoav uberosh zar'o le'olam. And return their blood, cause their blood to come back upon their heads, the head of Yoav, and upon the head of his seed, literally his seed, but figuratively his descendants or male descendants. Zera means seed. That implies male descendants. Le'olam, okay, forever, for eternity. Ule David, ule Zaro, ule Beito, ule Kiso, ye'esh shalom ad olam im Yahweh. And for David and his seed and his house and his dynasty, yesh shalom ad olam im Yahweh. May there be peace forever from Yahweh, or in the name of, or coming from Yahweh. Okay, verse 34. Boo, you want to come back in? Come, sweetie boy. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Take your chair. Here, come over here, sweetie boy. Come. There we go. Okay. Verse 34. Wa Ya'al bin Yahu ben Yehoyada wa yivga bo wa yamitehu. So Benayahu, the son of Yehoyada, went up, right, and literally went up at this point. Why? Because Ya'al? If you understand the geography of Jerusalem, we know that so Yoav is where he's grabbing onto the horns of the altar of sacrifice. That's up on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is above. We said that at least according to archaeologists such as Eilat Mazar, they've actually excavated, although his palace had not yet been built. Solomon's palace is only going to be built later on, along with when God's temple is built, when the temple of Yahweh is built. But it's down below the city of David. So Benayahu literally goes up the hill, okay, to the Temple Mount. Yal Benayahu ben Yehoyada. So he went up, Wayivgabo, and killed him, struck him. Wayamitehu, and killed him. Okay, struck him and killed him. Wayikaber babeito bamidbar, and he was buried at his house in the wilderness. Okay, that's Yoav. So that's it. Yoav is now put to death by Benayahu at the orders of Solomon, who was instructed by David on David's deathbed. David issuing a vendetta against Yoav for killing these two innocent men, Avner ben Ner, who in turn had killed in self-defense Yoav's brother Asahel, right? And that's the whole story that come full circle. So we see the karmic justice of Yahweh, we could say. We see that things may be buried for a while, but not forgotten. We see that vendettas are actually issued and carried out. And we see that even though Yoav was David's nephew, the son of his sister, Tsuruyah, that nonetheless David executes, or David issues, a vendetta against his very own nephew, because that nephew nonetheless spilled innocent blood on a number of occasions. Okay, verse 35. Wayiten Hamelech et Benayahu ben Yehoyada tachtau al tzava, and David made Benayahu, the son of Yehoyada, gave him the position over the army in his place. In other words, in Yoav's place. So Benayahu kills Yoav, and then Solomon makes Benayahu head of the army in place of Yoav. Tzadok HaKohen natan melech tachat Evyatar, and Tzadok the Kohen, King Solomon made, Tzadok the Kohen, Tzadok HaKohen natan melech tachat Evyatar. So he made Tzadok the Kohen to take the place of Evyatar. Who is Evyatar? Evyatar was from the house of Eli. This is already going back to the beginning of this book of Samuel, when Eli is said that his descendants will not exist, or will be destroyed, and Evyatar had actually gone over to Adoniah, who we mentioned was David's son, who had staged a coup after David's death, before David's death, attempting to take over the kingship instead of Solomon, to whom the kingship had been promised after David's death. At any rate, a lot of complicated, interlaced relationships and connections and stories, but that's the bottom line. So here we see the establishment and the execution of a vendetta in the Torah, and we see it played out and come full circle. Okay, well, let's stop here. Any questions? Any comments? I'm kind of getting tired. We're supposed to go on to Leviticus chapter 23. Maybe we'll do it a little bit. I've spent a lot of time on this, on these other issues here, but I suppose we can try to do it for a little while. But I want to take a break for a minute or two. We're going to put on music for about 5 minutes, and then we can get into Leviticus chapter 23. Do we have any questions, any comments before we do that? Yes, no, maybe so. Anybody? Lavi, do you have any questions, baby? No? Okay, I'm going to put on music for a couple of minutes, and then when we get back, we will start looking into Leviticus chapter 23. Let's see what music we can put on here. Oh. Let me find something good here. Let's see the other one. All right. There we go. That's always a good one.
Alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Dos taras tiene con él, la una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh. La una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh. Mi querido es alto y zoccola lo metió a detener. Mi madre y zoccola lo metió a detener. La, la, la.
Cuando el rey Nimrod al cabo salía, vino en el cielo y en la estrellería, viéndolo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham Avino. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
La mujer de tierra no ven nada, día en día ella pregunta. De la cara tan demonada, ella ya sabía el bien que tenía.
Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
שחרחורת יקראוני צחי האורים ומילת שמש קיץ בלי שחורים יפי יפי כל כך בעינייך אש בוערת בי כולו שלך שחרחורת יקראוני כל יורדי מים אם עוד פעם יקראוני יפי יפי כל כך בעינייך אש בוערת בי כולו שלך שחרחורת יקראוני כל כך. בעינייך אש בוערת ליבי כולו שלך.
Okay, let's continue. Welcome back. We're going to go for not too much longer. Let's get rid of these banners and put back up what's supposed to be put up. Okay. Once again, this is Hakham Melech Rahmiel of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And this is weekly Torah study. We're in Leviticus chapter 23. Where we left off last time was we just spoken about the Omer offering, also known as the wave sheaf offering, or the elevation offering, the elevation sheaf offering. It's a first fruits offering. We spoke about it last week. It has to do with the barley harvest, which is the first harvest in the land of Israel. So let's dig into chapter 23. Let me bring it up here. And there we go. So we're going to go into the Hebrew here. And let me just open up the English in case we need to refer to it. Come, Shoham. Show, sweetie boy. Come on. Come. Behave yourself, though. Come, baby. Good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good little boy. Okay. So, we are in Leviticus chapter 23, verse. Let's see what we're up to. Right. So we just spoken about the Omer offering, and we said it's the first fruits of the barley harvest. We always bring Yahweh the first and the best. Just like if we won, the analogy I gave is if we won $1 billion in the lottery. Before we go out and buy things for ourselves, we're going to first buy our mom a house or a new car or something like that. Okay? Even more so here because Yahweh is directly responsible for the bounty of the harvest, and so we thank Him first. We don't eat. The whole idea of Omer offerings, we don't eat, and the New Year starts not like the rabbis say in the fall with their made-up holiday Rosh Hashanah, which never exists anywhere in the Torah. There is a holiday on the first day of the 7th month, which we'll get to in a little while, that's called Yom Teruah. But the New Year starts, according to Exodus chapter 12, verse 2, in the Chodesh HaAviv, the month of the ripening barley. That's when the month starts, in the spring. It starts in the month that we were taken out of Egypt. Everything is counted from this defining action, this defining, I hate the word miracle, it's so overused, but this defining action that Yahweh did when He took the children of Israel out of Egypt, destroying Egypt, one of the superpowers of the world at the time, okay, and taking us out intact from the destruction of that superpower. That's when our year starts. So, no, okay, so, and we're going to talk about the holiday of Shavuot, or the Festival of Weeks. Here they call it the Feast of Pentecost. That's just standard English or maybe even a Christian-leaning translation, but it doesn't matter because we're looking at the original Hebrew. So what is Pentecost? Penta means, in this case, 5 or 50, and cost means count. So we're counting 50 days. That's what Shavuot is. Okay, we count 49 days, and then the next day is the holiday of Shavuot. So first of all, the rabbis tell us that the holiday of Shavuot celebrates what? Anybody? According to the rabbis, if we were all rabbinical Jews, what would we say that the holiday of Shavuot celebrates? Somebody please type it in. Let's see how much you know your rabbinical Judaism. You have to know your rabbinical Judaism in order to know what a load of baloney it is. Anybody? What do the rabbis say that the holiday of Shavuot celebrates? Going once? Going twice? They tell us that it is a celebration of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. I don't know if we'll have time to go into it this week. Maybe I'll try to go into it next week, but I can show you that Shavuot cannot fall and does not fall on the day that the Torah, meaning the 10 Commandments, was given to the children of Israel. Okay, I can prove that definitively. Okay, so that's made up by the rabbis. Now let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, the reason they made it up is because the original meaning of the holiday, which we're going to learn now, which we're going to study now, could not be carried out in the exile. Okay, let's give them that. I mean, I'm not giving them that, but let's potentially give them that. But now we're back in the land of Israel, and we should be unwinding all of this nonsense that we've had to suffer for the past 2,000 plus years. Oh, geez. Let me plug in. Already have it set up. 1 second, please. We should be getting rid and unwinding all the nonsense that we had to suffer during our exile. We should be going back to the original meanings of the Torah. Whether you want to say that the rabbis created a form of Judaism that was necessary for the galut, necessary for the exile, what is going on? Okay, I see this fell out. Oh, righty. Got it. 1 second, please. Or not, I tend to say not, okay? I always say, as I've been saying for years, I have all kinds of little quips and sayings that I've built over my many, many years of being Karaite. And I always used to hear, well, the rabbis kept us in the exile, meaning they guarded us, they kept us in the exile. And I always say, yes, that's right, the rabbis kept us in the exile. It's because of rabbinical Judaism that we stayed in the exile for so long, because it is a distortion, it is a departure from true Torah. Okay, we're in verse 15 here. We're in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15. Let's read it. Sfartem lachem mi maharat ha-Shabbat miyom haviachem et omer hatenufa sheva Shabbatot mimot tiena. So you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat. That's a very loaded word in Karaism. I've mentioned this many, many times before. Miyom aviachem et omer tenufa. From the day of your bringing, or when you bring the wave sheaf offering, this first fruits offering of the barley harvest that we spoke about earlier last week. Sheva Shabbatot mimot tiyena. You shall count. There shall be 7 complete Shabbats that you count. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into this now because I've gotten to it many times before, and we've spoken about this so many times before that we can speak about you on Karaite Insights, where I write this out in full. Oops. Give me 1 second here. So the article is called On This Very Day. I'll post a link, and it explains in detail the issue or the issues at hand here. Okay. Let me say very briefly that the word Shabbat can only mean the Shabbat holiday. In other words, what we call Saturday. Okay. So the only way to read this verse is Shabbat. You shall count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, meaning the day after Saturday, meaning you should count for yourself the day after Saturday is Sunday. So you shall count for yourself starting Sunday, the day after you bring the day on which you bring the Omer offering, this wave sheaf offering. When do you bring it? We saw earlier you bring it specifically Lamakorat Shabbat. You bring it the day, let's find that here. Okay. We don't always get some underneath it. Omer, it's I'm sorry, where is it? Oops, it's up here. Where's Shivat Yamim? It's going to be Macharat Shabbat right here. Okay, it's in verse. It's in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 11. We bring this Omer offering, this first fruits offering, celebrating the barley harvest in or around the time of the holiday of Chag HaMatzot, unleavened bread / Passover. We bring it the day of the Shabbat, meaning bring it on a quote-unquote Sunday. Okay? Starting on that Sunday, we count 7 Shabbats. That's what it says here. Okay? From the day of the bringing of the Omer Tenufa, of the wave sheaf offering, Sheva Shabbatot mimot tiyena. You should count a total of 7 Shabbats. Okay? Meaning start on Sunday, 7 days later is a Shabbat. That's 1. 7 days after that is another Shabbat, and so on and so forth. You do that 7 times. Sheva Shabbatot. You count 7 Shabbats. Okay. Again, I'm going to post the article here. If you want to look in detail, then you can see. Let's do this again. Then you can see it in detail. I go into detail in this article. Okay. Let me post it. Up here. Okay, you can check out that article and then go into it in detail. Okay. Then verse 16 says, Ad mi maharat ha-Shabbat ha-Shiva'it tisparu hamishim yom. Then until the day after the 7th Sabbath. So the 7th Sabbath day is the 49th day, right? So we count 7 Sabbaths, 7 Saturdays. It's 49 days we've counted. Tisparu hamishim yom. So on that following day, that's the 50th day. That's day 50 we count. So the day of the Omer offering is day 1. That first Shabbat is day 7. The second Shabbat is day 14, etc. The 7th Shabbat is day 49. The following day is day 50. Okay, so on this day, Hamishim Yom, so what do you do on the 50th day? This is the holiday of Shavuot, the festival of weeks, or they call here the festival of Pentecost. What do you do on this day? You bring a new grain offering. Mincha is a grain offering in this context. Okay? So what does this mean, a new grain offering? Well, you have to understand a little bit about the nature, the agricultural season, the agricultural cycle in the land of Israel. It's going to be made explicit here, but nonetheless, if you live in Israel, you'll know that the barley ripens right around Passover time, and then about a month and a half later, the wheat ripens. And you can see this if you live in the land of Israel. Around Passover time, actually, it must be around Passover time. Well, not in this modern day and age because we follow the calendar of Hillel II, but we Karaites follow the actual calendar of observation. And so we go out and we look for the almost ripe barley, what's called the Aviv barley. So according to us, the Passover must fall right around the barley is completely ripening. And then 50 days later, just by the very nature of the agricultural cycle in Israel, you'll see that that's right around when the wheat is ripening. The wheat is it's a larger plant. It's a more durable plant. The seeds are bigger, at least in modern times, and it ripens about a month and a half after the barley ripens. Okay, so what do? You take a new grain offering, and you bring it to Yahweh 50 days later. This is the wheat. This is the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Passover is associated with the first fruits of the barley harvest. Shavuot, Chag Shavuot, the festival of weeks, the festival of Pentecost is associated with the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And then we have another harvest holiday that's Sukkot, that's associated with the ingathering of all of the other fruits. Okay, and there we don't bring a first fruits offering. That's kind of like the last fruits. That's when we celebrate all of the bounty of the harvest throughout the entire agricultural year. Then so the agricultural year ends. Okay, if the agricultural year starts on the first day of the 15th month, that kicks off the start essentially of the agricultural year. Really, it's the Omer offering, but give or take, we'll say the 15th of the first month, when the Chag HaMatzot, when the Passover offering is brought and the festival of unleavened bread starts. Then 6 months later, on the first day of the 15th day of the 7th month is when Sukkot starts, and that represents the end of the agricultural season. The agricultural season is within the Torah is essentially a 6-month season. It's from the first of the 15th of the first month until the 15th of the 7th month. Okay, and therefore it's ridiculous to say that the first of the 7th month, which we'll get to, is Rosh Hashanah, is the new year. It's not. It's a holiday that's leading up to the end of the agricultural season, not a kickoff of any kind of year. That is again something completely made up by the rabbis with basically no basis in the Torah itself, in the Tanakh itself. Okay, so you count 7 Shabbats. That's 49 days. The 50th day, the next day, is when you bring the first fruits of the wheat harvest. The wheat is now ripe. Again, before you start eating of the wheat, you first bring an offering to say thank you, to show your appreciation, to show your gratitude to that Yahweh is the one who has given you the harvest in the first place. Okay, he gets the first, he gets the best, as we always say. Okay, verse 17. We're going to end soon. V'mosh avotechem taviu lechem tnufa 2 shne esronim solet ti'ena hametz te'fena bikurim liYahweh. Okay, so from your dwelling places, from your habitations, you shall bring lechem tnufa. You shall bring. It's another wave offering, but this time it's not tnufat omer. Okay, it's not a sheaf of barley. It's bread. You bake 2 loaves of bread made out of wheat. Lechem tnufa, as we see right here. Lechem means bread. Tnufa again means either a waving. You're either going to wave it, or an elevation offering, sometimes called. Either it's lifted up, like you would lift up a baby or something like that, or it's waved up and down as a way of saying that you're giving it over to Yahweh. You're giving it over to God. Shtayim. Okay, so lechem tnufa shtayim, meaning 2 loaves of bread which you wave. Shne asronim solet ti'ena. Each one, maybe together. Shne esronim solet ti'ena. They shall be altogether 2/10 of. It doesn't say here, but whenever it says esronim, This means 2/10 a volumetric measure called the ephah. We won't get into right now. It's essentially 2 loaves of solet. Solet is high quality flour, tiena. So you're baking 2 loaves of high quality wheat flour, and it's specifically chametz. Okay. Now there is a law that chametz should not go onto the altar of sacrifice, but this is not going onto the altar of sacrifice. We learn that in Leviticus 15, that chametz is not allowed to be put onto the altar of sacrifice. It's not allowed to be a fire offering. This is not a fire offering. This is a wave offering. You don't throw it onto the altar. You take the loaves and you wave them up and down, or you lift them up. Okay, so it's made out of leavened wheat flour. It's basically bread, 2 loaves of leavened bread made out of wheat, out of top wheat. Fena bikurim, and so they should baked. So baked leavened bread. Bikurim is the first fruits to Yahweh. It's a first fruits offering of the wheat harvest. Bikurim comes from the word bachor. Bachor is the firstborn. This is a slightly different form. This would be the coming from the PL form of the verb baker instead of libkor, and so this is representing the first fruits, like the firstborn. This is the first fruits. It is kind of like the firstborn of the harvest. That which comes out of the harvest first, you bring it first to Yahweh. Okay. So what's the idea here? We celebrate Passover, Chag HaMatzot. Technically, we bring the Passover offering on the 14th of the first month when the sun goes down. That's when the 14th is becoming the 15th. As who was it last week? I think it was Suri. Was it Suri who called it Schrodinger's day? Right? It's neither the 14th nor the 15th. It's the 14th changing into the 15th. Then we celebrate Chag HaMatzot for 7 days, and ostensibly either during or right around the time of Chag HaMatzot, the barley harvest is ready. We bring the first fruits offering of the barley harvest. That's the Omer Atnufa. Okay, so that's Omer Atnufa, and this is Lechem Tnufa. Okay, Omer, we said, is a sheaf. Sheaf is barley stalks or stalks of grain wrapped, tied together, basically usually with another stalk. Okay, and that's Omer Atnufa. Okay, Inifet Omer. Okay, but here we don't have sheaves. We have loaves of bread made out of wheat. So this is the bikurim. This is the first fruits of the wheat harvest, occurring 50 days after the sacrifice was brought. Actually, 49 days after the sacrifice was brought for the first fruits of the barley harvest. So there are 2 first fruits offering. One, around the time of Passover, a sheaf. And let's bring up a picture of a sheaf, so we all know what it looks like. Gnarly or barley. Okay, so that's a sheaf right there. There's your sheaf. Okay, it's a bunch of grain stalks tied together, a bundle. Okay, and then we have 50 days later, we count 7. So that's brought on a Sunday, Lamacharat Shabbat. It's brought on a quote unquote Sunday, the day after Shabbat. Then we count 7 Shabbats. That's now 49 days. And then the day after is the 50th day. Now we take 2 loaves of wheat. The wheat harvest is now ready. We bring the first fruits offering of the wheat harvest, the bikurim of the wheat harvest. That's 2 loaves of top quality wheat flour baked into bread, and we bring it to the temple, tabernacle / temple. And we also, just like we did with the Omer Tnufa, with waving the sheaves of the barley harvest, we now wave or elevate, wave up and down or lift up the 2 loaves of the bread made from the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And that's the whole idea of Chag HaShavuot. That's all Chag HaShavuot is. It doesn't have anything to do with the giving of the Torah. That's made up by the rabbis later on. And as I said, I can prove definitively, I don't know if I'll do it today because I'm going to stop soon, but maybe we'll have time next week. I can prove definitively that the giving of the Torah did not take place on Chag HaShavuot. It had to take place after Chag HaShavuot. And the key to that is to understand that the story of Jethro arrives, and there's a whole intermediate story between the time that the Israelites arrive at Har Elohim. They arrive at Mount Sinai on the first day of before I say something wrong and stupid. We'll deal with when we deal with it, okay? But the intervening story of Jethro advising Moses to make a hierarchy of judges proves that the Torah is actually given after the latest possible date that Chag HaShavuot could have fallen on. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the giving of the Torah. That was made up completely by the rabbis. So if you ever hear it's Chag Matan Torah, that is a myth, that's a lie made up by the rabbis, okay? Okay, let's go to verse 18. Vikravtem al halechem, shiv'at kvasim tmimim b'nei shana, upar ben bakar chal v'elim shnayim yi'u orla liyahweh. So this is now, I'm not going to translate word for word here. These are now the burnt offerings, fully burnt offerings that are sacrificed together with these 2 loaves of bread, 7 sheep, 1 bull, and 2 rams. Okay. And then it goes on to give the details of these sacrifices. So together with that is the grain that goes with it. That's already, we learned that in Leviticus, back in Leviticus. So this now would be unleavened bread, or it would be flour mixed with oil, or it would be unleavened cakes, because this is now a fire offering. So it comes with the grain. Excuse me. So these animals, excuse me, 1 second. These animals are sacrificed together with their grain offering and nischehem, and their libation offering or drink offering. Excuse me. And this is spoken about again earlier in Leviticus when we learned it, that fire offerings are always accompanied by grain. Oh my God, grain and drink offerings. And it says here that the ishe, these are fire offerings. So because they're fire offerings, they're not leavened. Fire grain that is thrown on the altar is not allowed to be leavened. Okay? A pleasant smelling scent to Yahweh. In other words, he's going to smell the scent of these sacrifices, and it's pleasant to him. Why is it pleasant to him? I don't think he needs to eat a hamburger or anything like that. The idea of Israel sacrificing to Yahweh is a pleasant smelling scent to him. It's meant figuratively rather than literally. Or shall we say literally and figuratively, because to us, it would actually smell like barbecue. But to him, that's not what's important. To Yahweh, that's not what's important. What's important is the idea that we're remembering him, and that we're appreciating him, and that we're honoring him, and that we're showing our gratitude to him for all that he does to us. In this specific case, the bounty of the wheat harvest. Okay, verse 19. It goes on to say, so now you're going to bring what's generally translated as a sin offering. But when we studied this, we said it's a purification or a recompense for sin offering, right? In case we have sinned by mistake, we bring this chatat offering, and that is to say basically, sorry if we did anything wrong by mistake. Usually, specifically speaking about inadvertently defiling the temple area with impurity, and so we bring this chatat offering, the shnei kvasim b'nei le'zevach shlamim, and then we bring these fellowship or peace offerings. These are kind of like, hey, Yahweh, we just really, we care about you, kind of thing, or we're saying hi, or we're trying to fellowship with you. Okay, so this is a very typical kind of sacrificial litany that's brought on various occasions. Okay, verse 20. והניף הכהן אותם על לחם הביקורים, תנופה לפני יהוה על 2 כבשים, קודם יהיו ליהוה לכהן. Okay, so 1 second. והניף הכהן אותם על לחם הביקורים, תנופה לפני יהוה על 2 כבשים, קודש יהיו ליהוה. So this is speaking about the 2 sheep that are brought as fellowship offerings. So they are also symbolically lifted up or elevated or waved together with the 2 loaves of bread. So we have 2 sheep as a fellowship offering. Fellowship offering is kind of a positive offering, a good offering. The chatat, the goat, is kind of the sin offering, or the recompense from sin offering is kind of a bad or a negative offering. And the first one, the fully burnt offering, the ole, is kind of like how shall we say? It's the basis for all offerings. It's kind of like the basic offering, right? It's a fully burnt offering. Again, I'm not going to go into the details here because we studied it when we went through these different type of offerings. But basically, the good offering, right, the fellowship or the peace offering, which is saying, "Hey, Yahweh, we're really saying hi, and we really kind of love you," kind of thing. I'm kind of paraphrasing. It's waved together symbolically with the otam alechem abikurim. So maybe the bread is waved above the kvasim, above the lambs, okay? But symbolically, at least, these 2 lambs that represent the peace offering, the fellowship offering, are waved together with the 2 loaves of bread that represent the first fruits of the wheat offering, okay? Verse 21. Ukrotem ba'etzem hayom hazeh mikra kodesh. Stop there. And you shall declare on this very day a Mikra Kodesh, a holy convocation. I've always said that I hate that translation because it doesn't mean it. Who knows? I don't know what a convocation is. Do you? I certainly don't. A convocation called basically it's a calling together of all the people, of all the people of Israel. Okay, or a declaration of a holy day. Let's say Yelechem. Okay, Kol malechet avodah ta'asu. You shall not do any type of menial labor. We've spoken about the difference between milacha and malechet avodah. We've spoken about how the Torah is often onomatopoeic, which is just a fancy way of saying that the way that words sound give hints as to their underlying meaning. And this is not some kind of mystical interpretation, quite the opposite. It's almost like if I were to say, oh, I don't know what's any other onomatopoeic thing. You know, if I were to say to someone, you know, tisk, 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 right? The sound of the word implies displeasure. Here, the fact that it says Malechet Avodah, and I've spoken about this many times, it's the Milacha implies a slightly less severe restriction on doing work on these days. The word Milacha is only used on 2 occasions, and that is on the Shabbat and on Yom Kippurim. That's when Milacha, all work, no excuses, no ifs, ands, or buts, is to stop. But Malechet Avodah is a little bit more sing-songy, implies a less severe level of restriction from work, and very specifically, as we'll see later on in this chapter, it seems to imply that food can be prepared during that day. Okay, so Malechet Avodah lo ta'asu, shall not do any excessive type of work. Chukat olam, it is an eternal statute. B'chol moshvotechem lidorotechem, throughout all of your dwelling places, all of your habitations, and throughout all of your generations. Obviously, we learn from this that this must mean in the land of Israel, right? Because if we're not in the land of Israel, then we can't bring, or if we've been exiled from the land of Israel and the temple has been destroyed, then we obviously cannot bring this, we cannot perform this ceremony. We cannot bring the first fruits of the wheat offering. So this is implying when the nation of Israel is intact, when there's a tabernacle or a temple. Okay. And then the Torah goes on to mention something else, which has nothing specifically to do at all with the holidays. But as we always said, the Torah works associatively. The Torah is maybe the first HTML document. HTML stands for hypertext markup language, and the whole chidush, the whole idea of HTML, or what made it so powerful. HTML is the language in which websites are written, is that it has what's called hyperlinks. Okay, so you have a topic and you'll have an underline, as you well know, and that links to a related topic. Okay, the Torah works through hyperlinks. It takes concepts that are related to the main concept, and it uses them as springboards or as jumping points to bring in other to bring in other related topics, because remember, the Torah was not, people did not have internet, and they did not have books. Books were not invented until the Middle Ages. And if you're ever in New Haven, Connecticut, back in the United States, you can go see a Gutenberg Bible at the Yale University Beinecke Rare Book Library. One of the first, of course, but the Gutenberg Bible is one of the first books printed on a printing press. At any rate, so this is brought in not because it has anything to do directly with holidays, but the rabbis will, of course, try to connect the two together, but that's not the reason. The reason is because the Torah works associatively, because the Torah had to be listened to and heard again and again. And so the best way to understand or to teach is to teach associatively. You take one topic and then you take a related topic, and therefore it goes into the brain better than just jumping around from topic to topic. And that's what we have here, verse 22. So when you harvest, when you cut down, when you cut down the cuttings of your land, and again, the implication here, we're talking about fields, okay? We're talking about barley and wheat, most likely, and other grains that were grown. So we're talking about grain harvest. So when you harvest or when you cut down, right? Because that's what you do with grains. It's different from fruits. You don't cut down fruits. You pick fruits. You don't cut down grapes or pomegranates or figs. You pick them, but here you cut them down. So that implies very specifically that the katsir is talking about the harvest, grain harvest. So when you harvest your grain, maybe would be a good way to translate it. But when you cut down your grain harvest of your land, lo techale pe'at sadcha, do not finish off the corners of your field. Okay, b'ktzurecha, b'kutzrecha. Okay, when you cut down the grains. Okay, so let's talk about that first. So you're supposed to leave the corners of your field for the poor, okay, and for the ger, and as we'll see right away. So when you go through, after you cut down the grains, so first you cut them, and then you go through and you gather them, and leket means you don't go back and gather every last grain. You go through once, you gather whatever grains you can, and whatever's left over is left once again. So you leave the corners of the field, and they call these the gleanings, okay? The gleanings of the field. When Ruth is invited on to live with Boaz, or is invited to work for Boaz, her job was to collect the gleanings of the field, okay? So I guess you're allowed to collect some gleanings, but not all. That's another story we won't get into right now. But the gleanings mean when you gather up all of the stalks that you've cut down, you don't gather up every last stalk. You leave some on the ground, okay? And that's left. Ketzircha lo tilaket la'ani we la ger azov otam. You shall leave them for the poor person and for the ger, for the convert, for the sojourner. Azov otam ani Yahweh Elohechem. I am Yahweh Elohechem. We've seen this before, that a lot of times when Yahweh is giving us kind of these moral commandments, or specifically when he's reminding us not to mistreat people, he'll use this phrase, Ani Yahweh Elohechem. Ani Yahweh Elohechem. We saw this a lot. We've seen this a lot during what's called what scholars will call the holiness code, okay? Which this is part of. Oops. Hello. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 17 through 26 are sometimes referred to by secular scholars as the holiness code, because it talks about a lot of what you should do to be holy and what you should do to be a good person. And we see this phrase occur often throughout the holiness code, of which Leviticus 23 is part of. Ani Yahweh Elohechem. I am Yahweh Elohechem. Yahweh is reminding us not to mistreat the poor And the convert, the person who comes from another nation, leaves his family, leaves his homeland, and comes to live among us permanently, quote unquote, the convert, to not forget them, to leave them the corners of the field, and to leave them the gleanings, to not take every last stalk off the ground, because they don't have anything. The poor person explicitly doesn't have anything. And there, imagine you move to another country. Hey, I moved to Israel. Many people have made aliyah to Israel, leaving their entire families behind. And anybody who's moved to another country knows how difficult it is, and knows that they start at an economic disadvantage. They don't speak the language. They don't know the culture. They don't necessarily have a business set up. They don't know how to do business in the place. Maybe they don't come with a lot of money. So the ger is someone who, the ger is a protected class, as is, of course, the poor person. Okay, Ani Yahweh Elohechem, Yahweh reminding us that He's looking, He's up above looking. You do this because I'm keeping an eye to make sure that you take good care of the poor person and the person who's come from another land to live with you. Okay, and I think with that we're going to end. Next, we'll get into what they call here the Feast of Trumpets. Sometimes called the Day of Shouting, the Day of Trumpets, the Day of Noise Making. This is what the rabbis call Rosh Hashanah. There is no holiday Rosh Hashanah at all in the Torah. Again, it's made up by the rabbis. However, there is a holiday on the first day of the 7th month called Yom Teruah, which is this, the Feast of Noise Making or trumpets. And we'll talk about that next time. So let me just make a mark as to where we left off, so I know for next time. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, did it. But at this point, we're going to end our study. We've gone on for about 3 hours, over 3 hours actually. And so I think it's enough for today. Okay. Before we end it, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any comments? Anybody? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Anybody? Last chance? If not, then I want to thank you. Let's take this off. Just give me 1 second, please. Okay, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Shabbat study of the World Alliance of Qara'im. Yeah, I encourage you to get involved on the descriptions, both in Facebook and YouTube. You can see all the ways that you can connect with us. I encourage you to become a member of the World Alliance of Qara'im. That's the best way to really get involved and to help us out as well, so that we can have a budget for doing the things that we need to do. And other than that, I wish you, wherever you are in the world, a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. Hope you have a great Shabbat and a good week, if Shabbat has already ended by you, or even if it hasn't. And if there are no more questions, then we will say goodbye for this week. And Bizarat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, we will be here again next week and have another Shabbat Torah study. I really love doing these studies. I think they're important. And once again, I encourage those who live in the land of Israel and who want to be part of an actual Karaite community to move up to the Golan Heights, to move up to Katsrin, where I'm living. And we are starting a Karaite, a Neo-Karaite, a World Alliance of Qara'im community here. Please join us. If you live outside of the land of Israel, hey, make Aliyah and then come up to Katsrin, come up to the Golan Heights. It's beautiful up here. The people here are very open, very welcoming. I love it here, actually, and I hope you'll join us soon. So this has been Hakham Melech Rahmiel of Karaite Insights and the World Alliance of Qara'im, thanking you for joining me in the study, and hope to see you again next week. Thanks again. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
Ika